Recording in progress.
Youngsters here.
Yep.
We're all new.
Happy New Year.
As a-
Happy New Year. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel better now.
Yeah, yeah, you're,
I feel like I don't know what I'm doing.
we're all second, like this is our second, we just,
Everyone, this was all of your second.
Yeah,
Longer and we'll go ahead and get started. Actually, we'll go ahead and get started now. Welcome everyone tonight. To the Design Review Board. This is a regular Design Review Board meeting in the city of Milton. I am Ken Warlick. This is a 7-member board appointed by the city of Milton Mayor and Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations. The Design Review Board reviews plans and makes recommendations to the Community Development Director for the developments, except single-family residential, in the form-based code and overlay districts. In addition, the Design Review Board approves or denies demolition requests and makes recommendations to the Board of Zoning of Appeals on variances. So with that said, I would like to ask everyone please to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. So before we start digging into things, I want to go ahead and do an introduction of our staff and our board members.
Michael Charterman, city staff.
Samia Coker, Cheltenham Walk.
Ralph DeVia, Bethany Road.
Celeste Jackson, Saddle Springs Drive.
Ken Warlick, Hipworth Road.
Danielle Gagne, Morning Mountain Way.
And Danella, Haybridge Lane.
Okay, great. So before we get started, as we do each year, we will take nominations for the chair and vice chair for the 2025 Design Review Board. So with that, I will open it up for any discussion or motion for a chair.
I would like to nominate Ken Warlick for chair.
I second.
Any discussion? All righty. I've been happy to lead thus far. I appreciate the motion and I accept that. All those in favor? Aye. All right, it's unanimous. Great. So moving on to our vice chair. Our vice chair, I would like to call for any motions for the vice chair for the Design Review Board for 2025.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate David Jackson.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? All right, so we have a motion for Mr. Jackson, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, it passes. All right. Is that good, Jackie? Need to be a little bit more formal?
Yes.
Is he aware of that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, FaceTime. So he is aware of the nomination, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It wasn't kind of a voluntold kind of thing, right? So he said he was absolutely happy to help out and continue to serve. So that's correct. Okay, so good to move on. All right, good. So do we need to approve the minutes from December since we were not here in January? Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. So looking at tonight's agenda, can I get a motion to approve or amend the agenda for tonight?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion from Ms. Gagne, a second from Ms. Jackson. All those in favor? Aye, all right. And next we'll move on to the approval of the meeting minutes from December 3rd, 2024.
I'll approve the meeting minutes of December 3rd, 2024.
I second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Great, it's unanimous. Okay, so tonight, 6A, we have demolition of structures. There are none on the agenda, so we'll move straight into courtesy review. 7A, V25-1, which is 15055 Birmingham Highway. Michael, good to see you.
Good evening, board members.
Good evening.
The applicant is Marlon Long, and there are 3 total addresses. 15055 Birmingham Highway, parcel ID 22392005590844, for a total of 2.51 acres. Parcel ID 22392005590851, for a total of 4.3 acres, 6 acres. And finally, parcel ID 22392005590869, 1.95 acres, for a total of 8.82 acres. These are the 4 variances being requested. Section 8862 from the UDC to reduce existing barn house and animals distance requirements from 100 to 16.82 feet adjacent to the west property line, to reduce the existing barn house and animals distance requirement from 150 to 100.9 feet from an occupied structure located on another property adjacent to the west property line, to reduce the existing barn house and animals distance requirement from 100 feet to 95.58 feet adjacent to the west property line, and finally, to reduce the existing barn house and animals distance requirement from 150 feet to 148.13 feet for an occupied structure located on another property adjacent to the west property line. And all these variances listed are for 2 total barns housing animals. Here are the 3 parcels. Here is Birmingham Highway and Glenover Drive. The zoning for the property is AG1, and you see it's the kind of taupe color. And then the green is a CUP. And the White Column subdivision is to the east and to the south, including these AG1 properties. And when the applicant was going through the variance process, it came to his attention the lots number 2 and 3 are actually located in the White Column subdivision. Here are the 3 variance support letters. We have 15101 Birmingham Highway, 15065 Birmingham Highway, and to the south, 605 Glenover Drive. And here are the support letters. Background: the applicant purchased all 3 parcels in 2021. The applicant is currently going through a minor plat process, which revealed the 2 non-compliant barns housing animals. The 2 barn structures predated Milton cityhood. Applicant is planning on removing 650 square feet of the southern barn structure as is located over a property line. The applicant believes this was an addition, not part of the original southern barn structure. The applicant discovered through the variance process that 2 of the 3 parcels purchased in 2021 are located in the White Columns subdivision. And here's a graphic I put together. The 3 lots he's proposing to do, which is the orange one here, which is a 1 acre parcel. The blue will stay exactly the same. It won't change at all. And then the green parcel, just the red line here, will be dissolved and it'll be 1 large tract. And it's easier if we go back to the zoning map. Just imagine a line going from here to here, snipping it off right here, and this will be its own parcel. And this line right here is dissolving. And it'll just be 1 big tract. And lot number 1 is not changing whatsoever. All right, and here are the 2 barn housed animals in pink. And then yellow shows the distance to the property line, which requires 100 feet, which they do not meet, and to another occupied structure, which means the house doesn't meet the 150-foot requirement. And same thing here, to the property line, and then to the occupied structure. And the red lines right here is the 650 square foot addition they are removing that's over the property line. And per the applicant's letter of appeal, he does not believe that was part of the original barn. It was an addition later on. View to the south, Glenover Drive, White Columns. View to the north. View to the west, Birmingham Highway. View to the east, which is that flag lot, White Columns. Here are the 2 barn housing animals seeking the variance right here. And here's the southern barn. And there's a covered riding arena in the back. That does not need any variances. And here's barn number 1. and this structure will remain as is. And here's barn number 2, southern barn. And if you follow my cursor, you can see how this kind of looks like it was an addition. You can tell right here, that's the piece that's being removed, the stall. Here's a better angle. Side photos of the property. This is the existing single-family home on 1055 Birmingham Highway. Here's the pasture land. This is on the eastern side, pasture land. Any questions for staff?
Michael, can you go back to show me where the structure is that's 83 feet too close to the? It's right there. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the property line right here. Essentially, you're required to be 100 feet from the property line, and then 150 feet to the house. Yeah.
So it's just backing up to their residence.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, they're going to own both of these. From talking to the applicant, he plans to sell this parcel up here.
Thank you.
Going through the minor plat process, we discovered the non-compliant structures.
Okay, so from any exterior neighbor, he's in compliance though.
Could you repeat that?
From any other neighbor though, it's just he's
Yes, from himself,
From
essentially.
himself,
It's
yes.
internal. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes, the 2 properties he owns are essentially the variance request.
Like, where's the 150 to the 148.13?
Right here.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. Got it.
Mhm.
Is there no administrative?
There is not.
Variance for
it was
1.5
discussed.
feet?
It was discussed to reduce it to 75 like 3 years ago.
Okay.
The council decided at the end to leave it up to the Board of Zoning Appeals on a case-by-case basis rather than lowering it to 75 feet.
Fair enough.
Mhm.
So 3 lots to 3 lots.
Bingo.
Okay. All right, great. Any other questions for
I have a
Michael?
question.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
you mentioned that, I think it was out parcel 2 and 3 are white columns. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does that bring any complications?
I'll let the applicant expand on that.
Okay.
But as you can see, the existing lot number 1, the house he's in currently now is not in white columns, but just the creation of this new lot right here, and then the large parcel technically are under the purview of white columns currently.
I have another question, follow up to that. So if later on down the road, someone purchases lot 2 and lot 3, then these structures would be allowed in place per the variance or no?
Yeah, so that, we would be completely separate from the HOA.
Right.
If the BZA grants the variances,
Mhm.
they would be compliant structures.
Got it, okay. Even if they sold lot 2 later on down the line, it would stick with the site and with the variance would stick with that lot 2 as.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
Grandfathered in.
Okay. All right,
with the land.
great. Any other questions for Michael? Well done.
Call
Thank
the
you.
applicant up.
Yes, please. If we can call the applicant forward.
Hello, board. How you doing today?
Good, good evening.
That's fine. Look, me up. Any questions for me? Anything you need to understand?
Any questions for the applicant? Did you have anything to add to what Michael said up there, or?
The point you made about the existing structures, so from my understanding, once the variance is created and accepted, that would be grandfathered in.
Okay.
They kind of want to keep the equine community there as well. No one sees the need to tear down a barn and a riding arena, and it kind of brings value to their property as well, having that there. As far as does it create any complications with white columns? When I initially bought this property 3 years ago, excuse me, no one knew for 20 years that those 2 tracks were part of white columns.
Huh.
So some type of way this has slipped through the cracks. It wasn't until I had a contract on the back 1.8 acres that the guy's title search turned up that was part of white columns. Even my title search at the time, the guy I bought it from, no one knew was part of white columns. I approached them and gave them my plans, what I was trying to do, trying to be a good neighbor. and everybody deep dived it and found out it was part of the white columns. At this point, I don't know if you know the history of white columns. They have since separated their two HOAs from gated to ungated sides. So now that process has been completed. So now I'm strictly dealing with the gated community because my property is nestled in the middle of the gated community. So I'm talking with my lawyers and their lawyers are in communication. They're going to send out a vote to the HOA. I think I need was like 76%, 82%, something like that. But they said, about no one ever knowing. They didn't know, we didn't know. Pretty my issue I have to take up with is with my title search company because that should have been exposed to me when I initially bought it. Because at the end of the day, who would buy a 10-acre horse farm mandated by HOA? It kind of doesn't make sense.
Right.
So everybody's kind of dumbfounded how it went this far. Like I say, it's been 20 years and they had to follow their procedure. I look up one day and I have a 20-year HOA assessment fee bill. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I've only been here 3. But their point was something that had to be done because the bill has stuck with the land because it's not by person. So they go from owner to owner. Evidently, it stays with the address for the property. So, we're all in conjunction trying to get this thing corrected on their behalf and mine. They've been in talks to send out this vote to the gated members, and hopefully, they should pass people flying colors because this is something that, we all were blindsided by. No one had any idea.
And you got to go through this and that. So
Then when I was doing that, I had to find out about the variances because we want to. My daughter's a rider. My daughter's the #2 small pony rider in the state of Georgia. So that's why I bought the property because for the riding arena and the facility, so she can go in her backyard and just come home from school. The kids go to Birmingham Falls Elementary, come home from school, clean and tack her horses up, go out and ride in her backyard. So I truly want to preserve that piece of the property. I've been approached, of course, that if you know where that land sits in the middle of white columns, by them deeming it part of white columns, I particularly have the last 7 acres of buildable land in white columns. And that creates another issue where I've been approached by numerous builders and contractors to try to offer me things that just is. Don't know if I should have taken it or not, but but I'm trying to be the good neighbor, the community guy. My family loves the horses. My wife's from England. She grew up in the type of era. So, and I that's why we moved out this way for the horse riding and the horse in the facility. So, but I just want to get it all corrected now that it's came about. So moving forward, like I said, I have a contract on that front 1.2 up front. Yes, I think so. But I just moving forward, I just like to get this rectified. So, I'm not handcuffed to any way to do anything. I just want to be able to run my property, you know what I'm saying? Because everything I'm requesting is happening inside of my gates. I'm just going from 3 lots, changing the lines to go to three more lots, just still inside my gate. So I'm doing nothing to affect the community, any neighbors. I'm just trying to get my situation corrected, which should have been done before I got there, but I've just got to clean it up at this point.
Well, we commend you for doing that. Thank you for thank you for that. Any questions for the applicant? No? Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time and thank the board and Mr. Carterman, man. I just want to tell you, he's been so helpful through this process, man. Made it very easy for me. I was worried about the city, but he made the process so easy, man.
See, they're not so bad.
They're not so bad. All right. Thank you guys. I appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you. We got to discuss real quick, I think, right? Or yeah. Sorry. You didn't have to stand there and talk anymore unless you wanted to. Okay. All right. So then, seeing no questions for the applicant, I will open up for any public comment. Do we have any? No. None? Okay. Then I will go ahead and close public comment and any discussion from the board. No. Yeah, it seems pretty cut and dry to me. Based on the photos, I drive by that basically every day, and it's pretty surrounded as far as like vegetation and stuff like that. And I know he's got a lot on his plate as far as having to deal with the white columns and all that too. So I really don't see any kind of additional recommendations other than our recommendation of approval for the BZA. So. I'll lead with the motion to recommend approval to the BZA as presented for the variances for 15055 Birmingham Highway.
I second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. All right. Good luck. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so moving on. Now we've got, we'll do courtesy review, which is 7B. It's 13165 Freemanville Road, variance 25-02.
The applicant owner is Brett Samuels, and the representative contractor is Corey Regan. The address is 13165 Freemanville Road. The applicant is seeking the following variances. 424B to reduce the 15-foot minimum side yard to 7.1 feet adjacent to the south property line for the existing shed accessory structure. 424 accessory structure setbacks to allow an existing shed accessory structure and existing pergola accessory structure to remain in front of the existing single-family home. And 1157A2 to allow an existing walking trail and fire pit to remain inside the 75-foot impervious setback. Here is the aerial, Freemanville Road, and here's Bethany. This property right here. The property is zone R2, and you can see there's AG1 all on the other side of the property and to the rear. And they have support from 1395 Freemanville Road and 13125 Freemanville Road. Here are the support letters. Background information. The applicant purchased the property in 2020. Per the applicant's letter of appeal, the shed and pergola were built by the previous owner and were believed to have been built in the 1980s with the original home. The impervious encroachments from the walkway and the fire pit were also built during this time frame. Applicant is currently going through the permitting process for a detached garage, which flagged the non-compliant structures. Here is a site plan. Here is a zoomed-in site plan showing the existing shed, which is in front of the house, and the encroachment into the 15-foot side setback. Here is the existing pergola, which meets setbacks, but again is in front of the house. And lastly, the fire pit and stone walkway, gravel path, which is in the 75-foot impervious setback. Here's a view to the west across Freemanville Road. And I wanted to provide an internal shot from Freemanville Road showing the shed, which is not visible from the street. My little green arrow, it's hidden behind this vegetation, so you can't even see it from the street. View to the east, which shows the backyard where the lake is located. And view to the south, which is a side yard, the south, and then another side yard to the north. Here are the shed photos. They're believed I built to look like a little mini barn with a standing seam metal roof. And here's the pergola. Any questions for staff before I call up the applicant?
No, thank you, Michael. Would the applicant please come forward?
Thank you. Corey Regan, Tullamore Way. Again, this is Brett and Andrea Samuels. They're clients of mine and friends of mine. And I think Michael's already sold it. So if y'all have questions for me, feel free to ask and I'll answer them.
Great, thank you. Michael, you gotta tone it down a little bit. Just give them a chance to at least talk, right? Great, thank you. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? No? All right, that was easy. Thank you. All right, so seeing none, I will open up for public comment. None? Okay, then I will close public comment and board discussion. I drive by every single day. I'm a neighbor, right? Live just on the other side. I didn't realize there were houses back there. And so seeing that they have, letters of approval from the two directly affected neighbors, and from the pictures that you showed, Michael, nice job. You can't really see it from the road, very, very discreet from the neighboring property. So I really wouldn't have anything to add from that. So any thoughts? No? Okay.
Oh, I drive by it almost every day, and I never knew there was a red barn back there. Or a little red shed back there. Good job hiding it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, seeing no more discussion, can we get a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of 13165 Freemanville Road.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, good luck. Thank you. Okay, moving on. We will go to 7C V25-03 15060 Freemanville Road.
So we gave you a copy on the dais. This applicant is seeking deferral. They are unable to meet the requirements of attending the DRB and BZA, so they're requesting to go to March. So really, we just need a motion if you will approve deferring them to the March DRB.
Okay, so I will make a motion to defer 7C V25-03 15060 Freemanville Road.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye, it's unanimous. Thank you. All right, Michael, moving on then.
All right.
7E V25-05 3196 Bailey Forest Drive and 3236 Bailey Forest Drive.
We're actually on D.
Yeah, we're on D.
Oh, D, sorry. I apologize. I'll retract that. 7D V25-04 1235 Hopewell Crest.
The applicant is Praveen with Yala. The address is 12335 Hopewell Crest. The applicant is seeking the following variances. 3.14D to reduce the 50-foot minimum rear yard to 19.2 feet adjacent to the rear property line for existing gazebo accessory structure. 633D1B to increase the 20% maximum lot coverage to 30.24% for proposed pool and pool decking for an AG1 zone property that fronts a public street. Here's the aerial map. And nowhere in this property, the rear of the property is the city of Alpharetta. This is the Hopewell Plantation subdivision. Here's a zoning map and neighbor support. 1210 and 1225 Hopewell Crest. And they also have support from the rear neighbor in Alpharetta, 520 Abernathy Oaks Way. And they have also received Hopewell Plantation HOA support on the left here. Some background information. The applicant purchased the property in September 2022. The pool permit was submitted in July 2024. Pool construction began in early September 2024 prior to issuance of the pool permit. The applicant stated in the letter of appeal the contractor made a mistake and began construction thinking the pool permit was issued. On September 16th, a city building inspector noticed construction on the property when he was making an inspection in the Hopewell Plantation subdivision for a different property. Since September 16th, no construction has taken place. Some background information, additional. The existing lot coverage is 36.74%, and the applicant is proposing 30.24%, a total reduction of 6.23%. The maximum lot coverage requirement began in 2012 for the city of Milton, and the original house was built in 1991 under Fulton County. The applicant is proposing a rain garden for stormwater mitigation. This will be reviewed and approved by the city development engineer during the permitting process if the variance for lot coverage is approved by the BZA. And the cabana seeking a rear setback variance was built prior to Milton cityhood. Here is the red showing the 36.7%, all the pavers that they removed essentially. And here's the green showing the pavers in the pool area. It's what they're adding, and the rest will just be grass. So before it was a lot of pavers and a lot of hardscape, and that's going to be grass for most of that area, a 6% reduction. Here are the renderings of the pool and backyard. Here's a view to the north across Hopewell Crest. View to the south, which is the backyard facing Alpharetta. View to the west. And a view to the east. This is inside the backyard. And they have an existing stucco wall on the other side as well. I assume it was built in 1991 when the house was built. Here's the backyard showing the pool that's partially constructed. Here is the existing cabana that they're seeking a variance that predated cityhood. Any questions for staff or for the applicant?
I have a question for you. Do you know so did they applied for a pool permit?
In July, they did.
It was just never released.
Correct. So it went through one round of corrections,
Mm-hmm.
and then they began building. The contractor did in
Got it.
September. One of our building inspectors flagged it and stopped construction that day.
Okay.
And that, to our knowledge, there's been no construction. I assume we would have gotten complaints if
Yeah.
they
got
were.
it. Okay.
They just had that tarp out
Do
there.
we know on why what the first, was any of the first round comments for the pool at that time due to lot coverage?
My comment was in there for the yes. That was
Okay,
one
so
of
there
my-
was a comment in there for lot coverage.
Yeah. uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
I have a question just to clarify so we all understand. The lot coverage, that is for impervious or the impervious area? Or what is, when you say lot
Impervious.
coverage?
Anything that's not dirt or grass,
Okay, so it's for the impervious area. And so but they're reducing impervious, no?
they are by 6%. So
Okay.
everything, Fulton County, they didn't have any rules. In fact, Milton didn't have this lot coverage rule till 2012. So essentially, they were a legal non-conforming lot until they started working on their property. The second you come back for a pool permit or anything, you have to meet the current standards and go for a variance.
Okay.
And I asked if they would reduce it, the minimum variance possible to seek, go from the BZA, and they proposed this reduction.
Okay. So they're reducing it. They're still not meeting it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Michael, would you mind going back to the plan? It looks like they're, sorry, up one. What are these two side pools?
Yeah, that's a koi pond, I believe, and just a fountain-like structure that holds water.
Okay, but those count towards
They do, yes. mhm.
impervious?
They're right.
Okay.
So does the surface water of the pool. And different municipalities had different rules for that.
So it's where water drains into it, but not into it, you know? Okay. Any other questions for Michael?
You mentioned a rain garden. What is that?
So it's a stormwater mitigation device. I'm going to
Okay.
show you where it's at. If you follow my cursor, it's right here. And it's supposed to capture the runoff, essentially.
Okay.
And they're responsible for the overage over 20%. So whatever they have to calculate it to capture that water over the 20% maximum. So not only are they reducing it by 6%, we're getting a stormwater mitigation on the property as well.
So it's kind of like a flow well
Like a
or
swell.
a fancy name for retention pond. right?
Gotcha.
But on a small scale on a residential aspect. So
A rain garden.
rain garden.
I should let Ralph answer that question.
Fancy rain garden.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Are they piping to the rain? Are they piping to it?
Let's see. Yeah. Appears so.
So it's guaranteed to get water to it?
But I'll defer the specifics to the applicant on the rain.
Yeah, it
garden.
looked to me like
looks like
it's
that.
capturing from the impervious, like the roundabout of the driveway and all that stuff. So it's capturing a percentage of the impervious coverage, maybe not necessarily from the pool or from the new construction. So
Can you go back to the picture that shows the approvals from around them?
Picture of what? Sorry.
That shows the approval letters around
Oh,
them?
yes.
So we're missing, if you go back to the map, we're missing the one on there.
Yeah, it's the HOA.
Oh,
Yeah, right here.
okay.
HOA support. I'll add that next time. I debated. I know what you're saying.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah.
we'll allow it.
Yeah.
You're off the hook this time. All right, that's all I needed. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Michael? No? All right, great. Thank you. The applicant can come forward. He did a lot for you already, so.
Praveen Mutiala. Yeah, have any questions for me?
Great. So any questions for the applicant or?
I do have one. The two side water structures, do you know what percentage, if those were removed, it would increase or decrease your lot coverage?
I think probably there are about 8 feet by 10 feet is the Koya pond, and the other one is probably 3 feet by 3 feet.
Okay.
I mean, I can give measurements.
And it'll be like 0.5%
Yeah,
of that.
okay.
It's minimal, yeah.
I'm just trying to think because I know BZA is pretty big sticklers for percentage of,
Mm-hmm.
they might recommend that, but if it's such a small percentage.
Yeah, I think really any other questions for the applicant or? No? Okay. Do you have anything else or go ahead?
I think, I can't remember, but I think, did you get a letter from the neighbor on the right of the house?
Or if you're facing it to the
Yeah,
left?
if you're facing your house to the left, yes.
Yeah, we did not get a letter from them. We did give to them, but they're traveling or something.
Okay.
We don't get a response.
Okay.
And that's a property where we have the stucco wall against them, so nothing goes into them. We got the one adjacent where we don't have that wall, so we got from the rear to the side and to the front.
Cool.
Okay.
And
I
the chair.
would recommend though, if you can, try to get them to sign one
Sure, absolutely.
before you go to the BZA. I think that'll be very helpful for them, knowing that every adjacent neighbor is okay with you guys doing this. So.
Absolutely, I'll reach out to them.
Yep. Okay. Anything else for the applicant? Okay, great. Thank you.
I just want to make a comment
Oh,
about
yeah.
Mike. He did an amazing job after the issues that we had with the contractor. The process with Mike was experience was very good. So he kept us updated and the experience is very good.
Great.
Thanks,
Well,
Mike.
great to hear that.
You're killing it tonight.
I know, Michael, it's your night. Your night.
Gold stars we can give out.
Thank you so much. Okay, so with that, seeing no more questions for the applicant, I will open up for public comment. We have none. All right, then I will close public comment and board discussion.
What is of the impervious, what's the percentage that is trying to meet?
20.
It's 20%. So I think I kind of just did back of the napkin math. I think the house itself is actually even more than 20% because when it was built, and I imagine the driveway and a lot of that stuff was all done at the same time, is that no matter what, because that came into play in 2012 with the city of Milton, they were going to be over coverage no
Gotcha.
matter what. Don't like the fact that contractor moved forward with the pool without the permit. But the fact that they're making a conscious effort to try to get that reduced down, which looks to me like pretty much a pool with just a little bit of coping. I think I'm okay for that. Good thing is they've taken all the steps, right? So it would be up to BZA on whether or not they would allow it or not. So as far as what I see, you got pretty tall stucco walls surrounding it. Everything else looks pretty enclosed. And so I can't imagine saying plant more trees or anything like that to kind of try to hide it would really do any good at this point. So any other thoughts? No? Okay. Michael just makes it too easy for me.
I know.
Okay, well, so then seeing no more discussion, I will open it up for a motion. I'll make a motion to, with the idea that they've tried to, reduce coverage and try to get it down as small as possible. Even with the house and the driveway being at the size that it is, it's already, over that minimum coverage. So I would say make a recommendation for BZA to approve as submitted.
I second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Great. Moving on, I do have one question for you though, Michael, if that's okay, if I can speak out of turn. So it seems like we're seeing more and more of these lately. We're seeing more and more of, oops, now we have to come back. Is the city keeping track of the pool contractors and the contractors that are oops? Or do we have that? Is that something that I guess where I'm going with this is if we just consistently see a repeat pattern and it's constantly having to come from us or come to the BZA, is there a checks and balances internally with the city and staff when it comes to you guys for a pool permit or for a cabana permit or something like that, that kind of brings a red flag up? They're like, hey, these particular contractors have done this before, or no?
We do have an internal system where we look for lack of a better term, repeat offenders.
Got it.
This has been a discussion internally. Do we need to have another, public facing meeting? Like one time we had an HOA meeting where we discussed things that did and did not need permits. A lot of the HOA leaders would come and were aware of things that needed permits. And we kind of discussed, do we need another one for pools? But nonetheless, to answer your question, yes, we do have information that documents who builds without permits. And
Okay. Great. Well, maybe that'll help reduce that a little bit, right? So,
Put a picture on the wall.
yeah, I just know it's taxing for our citizens to have to put their faith in someone and then, and then have to subject themselves to this process, right? Obviously, it's rightfully due, but at the same time, as if there's some sort of checks and balances to kind of hit it at the pass, I like that. So anyway,
Do the
that's it.
contractors get a fine for that? How does that usually work when they get caught? Is there a fine for the contractors or?
so code enforcement gives a 1-month courtesy notice,
Mhm.
and then they would add a fine. And then after that, it goes to court where a judge would determine any type of penalty.
Mhm.
But if they're, in this case, they worked towards compliance immediately, stopped all work. So there was no need for a past citation other than the courtesy notice because they immediately stopped work and then it began the process for the variance.
Mhm.
Okay.
And ultimately, that fine or court summons or anything like that, though, is to the
Owner?
owner,
That's what I was worried about.
not to the contractor. Being in that industry multiple times is you'll have, hey, let's just move forward without permits. I think majority of, qualified and licensed contractors won't do that, but there's plenty out there that will. So unfortunately, it's not necessarily the contractor. That becomes a civil issue versus this would become to the actual owner of the land. So anyway, okay. Sorry to get off on a tangent. Just wanted to check on that. So we'll move on. So 7E, V25-05, 3196 Bailey Forest Drive and 3236 Bailey Forest Drive.
The applicant is Chase Wojcik, and the address is 3196 Valley Forest Drive and 3236 Valley Forest Drive. The applicant is seeking the following variances: 3.14D to reduce the 50-foot minimum rear yard to 38.8 feet adjacent north property line for an existing playground structure. 842E2A to reduce the 50-foot minimum rear yard to 2.4 feet adjacent to the north property line for existing private recreational basketball court. Here's the aerial. This is located in the manor, and the owner owns both tracks. And through the permitting process, I was the one that had informed him that this was not combined. He owns both tracks, but he never combined it. So that's another thing that I flagged. So he's going through the minor plat process to combine both tracks under one.
Does lot coverage come in play?
No,
Okay.
it's almost like 3.5 acres.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So good. We can move past that.
Yeah. The zoning is AG1 and directly is the manor, as I said earlier, and directly to the east is Forsyth County. Some background information. The applicant purchased the properties 3196, 3236 Valley Forest Drive in 2018. The basketball court was constructed by the previous owner from the Fulton County GIS map. The basketball court was constructed between 2016 and 2017. The playground, however, was constructed by the current property owner. And that came to light this afternoon. And if you see before you, the applicant revised his letter of appeal to detail the fact that the owner constructed the playground without a permit. However, he did not build the basketball court. The previous owner did. So that was constructed between 2019 and 2020. The applicant is proposing arborvitae tree screening in front of the basketball court to screen from the street view, which is Valley Forest Drive. And finally, after it was flagged, the applicant is currently going through the pool permit and now a minor plat process to combine 3196 and 3236 Valley Forest Drive, 1.1 acres in the back with the 2.14 acres in the front for a total of 3.51 acres. Here is the updated letter of appeal. And the only thing that was changed, to my knowledge, from reading it, was the fact that the homeowner built the playground structure, and the applicant details from talking to the owner that he was not aware that a playground needed a building permit. Here is the site. And if you follow my cursor, this is the property line to be abandoned. And it'll all just be one large parcel. Here's a zoom in showing the basketball court in red and the play set in blue, both over the 50-foot rear setback. The applicant is proposing 5 arborvitae trees to block the street view. And you can see the contours right here, how aggressive it drops down towards the north. Planting would be pretty hard on this side of the basketball court. And the existing house is so far away, you'll see from the photos. Here's a view to the east across Valley Forest Drive. View to the west, which is the backyard. View to the south, the other frontage on Valley Forest Drive as it's on a corner. And a view to the north. As I said earlier, this is where it slopes down towards the northern bordering neighbor. And he actually, the northern neighbor actually has a good amount of trees already blocking where the basketball goal and the play set is on his side of the property. Here are the basketball court photos. As you can see right here, it slopes down to the court where it's flat. So this is kind of a little berm and then in the flat area. So that kind of blocks the view a little bit when you're driving down the Valley Forest Drive. Here are the basketball court photos. And then the berm on the left right here. And here's a picture from the cul-de-sac facing the court. This is where he's proposing to plant the screening right here. So this is what he's proposing to block from the street view. The playground photos. Any questions for staff?
Did you already go over any letters?
They did not. They told me, or the applicant told me, they're still working on getting letters of support.
Okay.
And I recommended getting HOA support as well from the manor. So that currently is in the works from talking to the applicant this afternoon.
Okay.
So the basketball court was built when the variance was in place.
So the basketball court was built in 2017 prior to the owner purchasing the property in 18.
But
So
our variance was still in place.
you mean like the setbacks?
Yes.
Yes, correct. Yes, the previous homeowner
So
violated.
they violate.
Yeah, they were the ones that built the court.
So he inherited the problem.
Right. But he did, however, build the swing set in 2018.
It all looks pretty open to me. I know it's winter, but
Can you go back to the photo of the cul-de-sac where you said there was going to be more screening?
Yeah.
Is that not a gate right there?
That's the, I guess it looks like a curb cut. Yeah, it does appear to be like an opening gate. There isn't any violation of that. Each property is allowed 2 curb cuts. But looking at the grass, I don't know if that was ever used. Maybe the prior owner had that for something in the back. I'm not sure.
So they're going to plant trees in front of that?
Oh no, it's right in front of the basketball goal.
basketball.
Right, yeah. You see how the hill kind of goes upward? They stop it right around here where it goes upward. They're planting the arborvitae here.
Gotcha. Okay.
And they've got the other neighbor, it's got those large arborvitaes right there too, that looks like they're growing up. So you can kind of see right there. So, and to Michael's point, that is a pretty steep drop off right there. So I would think that if the neighbor there is okay with it, has a letter of approval, then anyway, we can discuss that later. So any other questions for Michael?
Michael, that is the closest neighbor right there?
Um,
Or there's a house
Let's
in
go to the
between these
aerial.
two?
So he owns this piece right here. And then, yeah, that would be the closest neighbor. Maybe this house back here. But there's a good amount of tree screening right here from the backyard. I didn't even see this house back there when I was walking around.
Is that a football field?
Appears so, yes.
It's only 50 yards.
So it's the basketball court, the playground, and the football field.
I would sign a letter of approval if it was my neighbor, just so the kids could use it, you know? Okay. Any further questions for Michael? No? Great job once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Can we call the applicant forward, please? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Chase Buchek. I work at Neptune Pools as a permit coordinator for them. And as Michael said, going through the permitting process, it came up that the lots weren't combined into one yet. And I think in the system also at the time, it didn't have the homeowner as a homeowner in there yet because there was a legal battle between the homeowner and the previous homeowner about that one side of the property. But that was, I believe last year was that decree?
Yeah, it was from like April 2024.
Yeah, April 2024, the homeowner got official ownership of both lots. So that came up. And then also the basketball court and play set when it originally came up. When I was asking the homeowner about the original variance process, I asked him if the basketball court was constructed before he purchased it. So the initial confusion was I lumped in the play set to that initial letter of intent that we revised this morning. I've been going back and forth with Michael on this probably every day for the past month. He's been great. But as he suggested, we are looking to plant the trees to block the screening or to screen off the basketball court from the road best we can, plant them where we can because the lot prevents us from planting anything towards the other neighbor's property and also further up the road. And I don't know if you could tell from the aerial, there's trees right above that upper area that also block viewing to that area from the street. But yeah, as far as we can, we're doing our best to screen off that area and try to move forward with the pool permit.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Yeah, I don't think you have much room to put a large tree in 2.8 feet, right?
Yeah, right. We're trying to screen off. I was like, I don't know what'll fit.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. We appreciate it. Seeing no more questions for the applicant, I will open it up for public comment. Then I will close public comment and board discussion.
You can put a pool in the setback, right?
A pool can go in a setback?
10 feet.
Yeah, 10 feet.
The pool can go in a setback.
It just has to be 10 feet from the rear side property line.
Yeah.
Can't be in the front yard.
Yeah. So the basketball court pre-existing, they inherited that, built the playground set, but you can't even really see the playground set too much from the road. And I looked at it, it's about the same distance. You guys have it to that outrigger that has like the monkey bars on it, but I'm imagining it's about the same thing to the actual structure of that.
Correct.
I really don't have that big of an issue with it as much as the basketball court, but again, that's for the BZA to decide. I do like the idea of planting the arborvitaes. What I would do is, if it's, purview to the board, is I would recommend, instead of just blanket 5 arborvitaes, let's put a size to those. So you can get 8 to 10 foot arborvitaes within a minimum distance of 6 to 8 foot apart along that front side, I think would be my recommendation, because then that would be adequate vegetation privacy, I guess, or at least to kind of conceal a little bit of that from the road. And then I would certainly recommend for prior to going to BCA that you look into the neighbor, trying to get their approval letter as well, since they're it looks like the lot next to it is like a field house and then
Yeah.
football court and then or football field, and then their house is, so I don't know if they'll be too upset about that, but anyway, so that's really all my 2 cents is if we do make a recommendation to stick with what they're asking, but make the arborvitaes 8 to 10 foot tall and a minimum of 6 foot to 8 foot distance from each other along that road.
Or could you even do it like a zigzag, like plant
Staggered.
one and then, yeah.
Yeah, that probably looks a little more natural.
You could do that. And then just stick with the 8 to 10 foot, 6 to 8 foot apart, just staggered.
Yeah,
Would you do 5 or would you add a couple more?
I would maybe do 7, put like 4 in the closest to the basketball court and then 3.
I like that.
Mhm.
Okay. Any thoughts on that?
I think it would look more natural, more like intentional to
Well,
stagger.
it'd also be an immediate screening.
Immediate
as well.
screening, yeah.
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 Okay. Any other discussion? That was a really great idea. You want to make a motion on that?
Sure. I would like to make a motion to approve the variance for 3196 Bailey Forest Drive and 3236 Bailey Forest Drive with the suggestion of planting 7 arborvitaes staggered where the proposed 5 are on the drawing now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and yes, make the trees 8 to 10 feet when planted, already mature size.
Okay. I will second that. So we have a motion for approval to the BZA for 7 screen planting trees, arborvitaes, 8 to 10 foot with a 6 to 8 foot distance in between.
Mhm.
All right. And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Good luck. Thank you. All right. So moving on, we have no final reviews. We have no new business. We have no old business. So, I'm sorry?
Can I have this one? I know we did our election earlier. I would suggest that because in the bylaws, according to have to do.
Okay. Okay. So then at this time, do I need to nominate a vice chair for tonight's meeting?
No, so we'll do it at the next meeting.
Okay.
Kind of normally.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, we have to elect Ken next meeting. What about Ken?
That's already good. Just
Okay.
the vice chair.
Just the vice.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that for us, Jackie. Thank you. Okay. So then, was there anything else? So then with that, I would like to call a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Moving on.
All right.
You ready? Hello, hello. Okay, yeah, it's ready.
We'll have first the call to order.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, call it forward. Okay,
I guess that's me, Shiva, sorry.
go ahead.
Good evening. This is the Design Review Board and Planning Commission joint work session. I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. And by starting off, I will like to ask for the introduction of our board members and our staff as well.
Agni?
Samia Coker.
Ken Warlick.
Rima Abdel Fattah, city staff.
Tracy Wilds, Land Development Manager. Jackie Jennings, City Staff.
My name is Judy Birds, Chair of the Planning Commission. I concur in Ken's call to order, and we'll let the remainder of our planning commissioners introduce themselves.
And I'm Vic Jones.
Kurt Nolte.
Brett Edwards.
And unable to join us tonight is Commissioner Trey James, Brian McNeese, and Sumit Shah.
Robin McDonald, zoning manager.
Okay, good evening, DRB and Planning Commission members. I'm Shubha Jangam, Principal Planner for the city. And I'm here with the Arnold Mill Small Area Plan and related text amendment. First of all, I want to thank DRB for hosting this joint session. And I want to thank planning commissioners for agreeing to the extra meeting this month. This courtesy review is very important for us at this stage of the project. And since you are two different stream of thoughts, we thought the project would benefit from the synergy of having you all here together and listening to each other at the same place and giving us your feedback. So that's why we wanted to have this joint session. Arnold Mill project sprouted from comprehensive plan, but there is a little more history to that. In 2014, the city did a visioning study for the same area, and although the visioning study was adopted by the city, no land use change did happen. So during the comprehensive plan process, community spoke again, and they wanted us to look into this area one more time. And so this project started. And some of you have been to every meeting that we had for this project last year. Thank you. But others obviously going to need some briefing. And we are going to do all of that today. We are going to give you all the highlights of all the progress that we have made so far and what is being proposed based on the feedback that we have received. And we are looking forward to your feedback on what is being proposed for this project. Now, I would like to invite our consulting partner from TSW, Gia Lee, and later on, Caleb Rassicot to give you the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Shubha. I'm Gia Lee. I'm here to give you an overview of the Arnold Mill Small Area Plan. And I think, will it show up on the screen?
It takes a minute for them to switch to the.
Okay.
It's open, huh? It's open?
Is it? Yeah.
Yes, it is open. Right.
A little slow.
Yeah, while we're waiting for the presentation to show up, okay. So here, we're here tonight mainly to talk about the Arnold Mill Road Corridor Study and the zoning recommendations we have come up right after this plan as the first step of implementation. So here we go. Okay, I'll just look on this side. Well, we'll talk about the small area plan overview. It will be very brief because it's mainly here we're talking about the code overview, and we'll leave some time for questions. But if during the presentation, if you have any questions you want me to address at the point, please feel free to just interrupt us. The small area plan, like Shuba said, about 10 years ago, you all have a visioning study for Arnold Mill Road, and now the corridor, after 10 years, it has shifted, some conditions has changed. So there is a warrant to do an updated plan for this corridor. So this is where we come in to do the small area plan. Even though time has changed, but I think the overall vision for this corridor is still the same. We want to try to maintain the rural character in this area, and we understand that the sewer will not be extended to this area, so there will be no discussion or opening about raising densities in this area. So all about keeping the characters and how to make this corridor a desirable, community. Well, basically, is to keep in line with the community wishes and Arnold Mill's rural character. And the planning process started in February in 2024. And we had 3 major public meetings where we worked with the community and listening to different input. And we had a community workshop, developed the plans for this corridor, and public open house to review the plan. And then we came up with the draft plan and the final plan recommendations at the end of last year. And with that, the first step is to see the needs for code changes, and that's where part of the implementation will be, and that's what we'll be presenting as the first step tonight. There are like 3 major key recommendations for the Arnold Mill Corridor study. The first one is focused on recommendations on transportation, because we understand congestion is a major concern for this area. There are about 20,000 cars per day in this corridor, and it's operating at a level service of D. So this is the main concern. So we're looking at how to alleviate traffic problems while keep the character of the rural feeling of this corridor. And in that, we feel like it's inconsistent with the visioning plan 10 years ago. We want to try to limit development in 2 activity nodes. One is in the northern area where you enter the city around the historic Chartwick Village area. And the other one is around Cox Road, where there is already seeing some development with the churches having the community center built up and potential expansion of the city park spaces. And another one is to looking at design guidelines to how we can develop how we can have developments to reinforce, I can't see, the classic rural aesthetic found throughout the city of Milton. And in terms of transportation, we understand that the corridor will potentially, most likely, the street will be expanded into a multi-lane option in the future, because GDOT, even though they did not set a timeline, but they do have this corridor improvement on their books for future expansion. To be responsive or to be more proactive in this approach, we have recommended something in terms of if this corridor really gets expanded into a multi-way thoroughfare, we want to recommend something which is more in line with the corridor's rural character. So we recommended like 3 different sections. We say different sections is mainly in terms of the right-of-way, because we understand based on the existing conditions, there might be different right-of-way constraints. In some area, you can be wider, some area can be narrow. But the same thing applies is we recommend a 4-lane with a central median, basically 2 travel lanes on each side, and a multi-use trail on the east side, because the east side is mostly controlled in the city of Milton, while the other side is partially Roswell and city of Alpharetta. In addition to the roadway, the multi-use trail, the difference in the right-of-way is reflected in the landscape buffer area, where you have more generous right-of-way or more topography. You can have a wider landscape median with multi-use paths, more meandering. And with there is constraints, the multi-use paths might be pretty close to the roadway, but there will be still minimum 6 feet of landscape buffer between the traffic and the multi-use paths. And in terms of development, we talked about focus them on 2 activity nodes. The first one is Cox Road. We looked at 2 different options. One is based on the existing AG1 zoning, strictly designed the concept around the AG1 zoning. They are all minimum 1 acre lot on septic system, and with a small commercial activity node at close to the intersection of Cox Road. And for that to happen, it might need a roundabout, but this is just a concept. It may not, it may need further study to validate the roundabout and the development, but that's just a concept for traditional development pattern. And we also looked at an alternative, which we call more like a rural hamlet. In this condition, it is the same density, and we still maintain the minimum 1 acre lot size, but just change the configuration to have slightly narrow lot, but deeper. The lot is deeper but narrower. In that way, we can have a wider buffer along Milton Road, which gives a more rural feeling in that area. And the commercial node is about the same size as the other concept plan. As for the other activity node around Chadwick Village area, we mainly centered around the historic Chadwick House and what already been on the table by the time when we were doing the plan. The area is also, there is a plan already in application process for developing of a small commercial node. So this further validates the activity node. We in the plan, based on some property owner input and community input, we imagined a country inn and a small commercial village. And there is basically no residential recommended here. So those are the major recommendations, and that leads to the zoning overlay recommendation we will have next.
Thank you very much, Gia, and good evening, planning commissioners and DRB members. I'm Caleb Rossico. Again, I'm a principal with TSW. I head our coding division and was brought into the process to make sure that this vision that Gia has set forth, which is really to preserve the rural character of Arnold Mill Road, to focus development into sort of walkable centers at Chadwick and then Cox Road, and very importantly, to implement some very attractive streetscape provisions. All of that is a vision, and the coding piece is really important because it gives us an opportunity to put that vision, which was supported through many public meetings, into the force of law. And so what we are recommending to achieve that is the creation of what we're calling the Arnold Mill Road Hamlet Overlays. And essentially what this would be is a new sub-district of the rural Milton overlay, similar to what you have in Birmingham today, which provides customized design standards for the Arnold Mill Road corridor that are primarily similar to rural Milton, but updated in a couple of minor ways. And so I'm going to walk through those with you. Now, in order to put that in a place in the zoning ordinance and the Unified Development Code that makes sense, we are recommending to give it a number of 6.5 in Article 6, which will require the Historic Preservation Ordinance to be renumbered. So if you look in your packet and you see that amendment, that really is all that is. So in terms of what the overlays entail, I want to emphasize something that Gia said initially. The overlays are intended to really address the physical aspects of the master plan, the streetscapes, some of the development characteristics, some of the open space characteristics, and very importantly, the preservation of a rural feel along Arnold Mill Road. And so we're going to be really focusing on those. I did want to remind everyone, because I think it is so important, that there is no proposed change to any underlying zoning or any underlying density. So everything that I'm about to talk to you about is strictly design-based. If a applicant, a developer chooses to develop under the AG1, they would be subject to this. So in terms of how everything is structured, again, this is it's almost like a sub area of rural Milton, very similar to what is at Birmingham. And so all of the general provisions of the rural Milton overlay will continue to apply except as modified in this particular hamlet overlay, which is why it's relatively short. Again, because rural Milton is a very robust document and really focuses on those aspects of Arnold Mill Road that weren't otherwise provided in there. And again, can't emphasize it enough, it does not talk about density and it does not talk about the use of property. And this was a very, very important point of conversation during the planning process. We felt very strongly that the citizenry of Milton was very supportive of keeping it AG1 and keeping it rural. And so we have not entertained any change to density or use. That would be something that would be at the discretion of the Planning Commission and the City Council to entertain in the future. So again, very, very important aspect. So what is in the overlay? Well, generally speaking, the overlay focuses on two areas, those two nodes that Gia talked about. The northern one is what we're calling the Chadwick node, very original. The southern one, the Cox Road node. So again, the underlying zoning in these areas does not change. Chadwick Road continues to be zoned C1, AG1, and R2A, and then the Cox Road node continues to be zoned AG1. And that in turn influences, again, some aspects of the overlay, some modifications that we had to make, which I'll talk about in a moment. Now, the first really important aspect to the vision that Gia focused on was making sure that the city of Milton has the regulatory tools to reserve room for that much wider rural roadway cross-section. We all know that this is a state highway, that the state of Georgia will have to be involved in that. But one of our company's recommendations to the city, based on our previous experience, is that it's really wonderful for a city to proactively define how they want their roadways to be. Just look at Alpharetta and what they were able to accomplish in Main Street by their city center. So the code has a provision that actually codifies this cross-section. So when a developer comes in, they will have to set the buildings back in such a way that it preserves the ability to implement this cross-section, to implement the future roadway widening, to implement the street trees and landscaping, and to implement the multi-use trail. So that's a very different modification to the particular area. And there are a couple of different variations of that depending on where you are. There's one area, most of the corridor, where the rural viewshed is actually increased to 100 feet. Really, the idea is making that rural area protected in long term. And there are a few other locations at Chadwick Node and the Cox Node where it's a little bit shallower based on existing conditions. So other things that are in this particular overlay are standards for streetscapes on the internal roads. We do know that if development occurs, there will be new streets provided. And so we make sure that those streets have sidewalks and street trees and landscaping in a manner that is consistent with the vision. We have a lot of customized landscape standards for this area. Again, I think part of the rural character is making sure that development is green. And even though Milton has some of the most strong landscape ordinances in the entire region, we've added a couple of additional provisions to Arnold Mill Road. We've put in place requirements for walkways so that if developments are built, there's a safe way to walk between uses in the community. We've incorporated some standards for outdoor lighting. These are actually very similar to what you see in Crabapple and parts of Deerfield today, where you'd have to do the pedestrian lighting. You couldn't just do the larger scale. And then a lot of talk about buffers. All of the buffers to adjacent AG1 areas would be the citywide standard, but internally, there are some relaxation of buffers internal to development. So if Gia showed you the Chadwick Farms, Chadwick Node, there would be relaxed buffers internal to the development. Additionally, we have a couple of fencing standards. Again, most of the rural Milton stuff continues to apply, but we have recommended a prohibition of barbed wire everywhere universally through this area. It's such an important high-profile corridor to the city that really doesn't make sense. And related to that, have put in place a requirement, again, similar to what we have in Crabapple, where when you build parking for a development, you've got to put it on the side or to the rear, so that when you go down Arnold Mill Road, if development does occur, that there are protections and there's sort of the aesthetic considerations that Milton has in all of its other commercial areas. Additionally, there is a small part of the ordinance that makes amendments to the underlying zoning, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So one of the things that was in Gia's drawing is a recognition that the lot widths, not the lot size, but the lot width in the AG1 is a bit wider than envisioned in this more walkable setting. So what we've recommended is to reduce the lot width in AG1 to 100 feet to realize that vision. Again, they'd still have to be 1 acre lots. They'd have to meet all the size restrictions. But in order to focus more of the homes in a way that allows more preservation in the rear, making them narrower allows that from a design perspective. Everything else is absolutely per AG1 citywide standard, rural Milton standards, and a modification. Now, if you are a standard regarding AG1 setbacks, so we were talking about lot size, but regarding setbacks, we've also made a couple of modifications. The big one is that, as I mentioned before, along Arnold Mill Road, it's not shown in this drawing, but it's critical. Along Arnold Mill Road, we are increasing the rural viewshed, which means the first 100 feet of most of the properties are going to have to be preserved as a primary viewshed, which means no septic, no parking, none of the other stuff that you would typically see in those areas. And so that is a modification. Internal to the development, meaning on the internal streets, we're recommending a front yard of 40 feet. Again, a little bit closer than your typical, but consistent with the vision. And we've also come up with a really, I think, innovative tool, which we believe will help to allow developers to preserve trees, interestingly enough. So one of the things that we did is we're recommending that because the lots are a little bit narrower, we're also giving the property owners flexibility to locate the homes in the resulting subdivisions in such a way that they can vary the setbacks a little bit for the preservation of trees. And what that means is, if you look at the diagram before you, under typical Milton zoning, there is a fixed setback on both sides of the property. And we have recommended here that if today, side A is 25, side B is 25. That's a total of 50 feet. So what we've recommended is a provision that would allow property owners to still have to meet the 50 feet, but if there was a tree they wanted to preserve, they can reduce it on one side. So basically do a wider setback on the side where the tree you want to preserve is, and a slightly less setback on the other side. And so that was something that, again, in the course of the design work that Gia did, she determined that we would, in fact, be able to encourage tree preservation without property owners having to seek a variance. And so that is in the draft. Again, the total amount is the same, but you can move it back and forth a little bit. Additionally, on a side yard that happens to be a street, we are recommending reducing it to 35 feet. Again, this is internal to development, not along Arnold Mill Road. Arnold Mill Road has that 40 to 100 foot rural viewshed. And then everything else is, again, per AG1. So where your accessory buildings go, where your parking goes, all of that is per the AG1 standards. Yes.
Will the developer have the choice? Or is it, once this is set in stone, it's the 100-foot wide by 435 feet minus the 100-foot rural viewshed? Or if they choose to do the 150-foot
Yeah.
wide lot, Okay.
It's
so
a
they-
minimum, that's a minimum.
It's a minimum. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's a minimum. Now, they would always have to meet the rural view shed on Arnold Mill. That is, as drafted, that's not negotiable. I mean, that's a mandate. Couple other things that are in here I wanted to mention is we did have some conversation, actually quite a bit of conversation with the community about architectural design. Again, if we're focusing on landscaping, Milton is also really known for its rural architectural character. The residents who came to our meeting were very in support of that concept. So what we have recommended is a series of architectural standards, architectural styles that match those. We've coordinated very closely with Bob to make sure that he's comfortable with that. And then in terms of internal streets, again, there are some other modifications to the separation between buildings within interior to the development. And then finally, I'm sorry, I was a bit out of order. It's been a very long day. So again, in terms of building design, we do have a series of standards related to building design. Again, these are very similar to the standards that you would have for, making sure that buildings have windows on the street, making sure that they have full depth porches versus sort of stuck on porches. And so all of that is in the draft. Again, Bob has been great at reviewing those, sort of figuring out what are some loopholes, if you will, in the current process and making sure that we tighten those a little bit for this particular area. And this was an area where we had quite a bit of public conversation. The 5 recommended styles, which should be of no surprise to all of you having been in Milton for a while, but we have colonial revival. We have a craftsman style as a permitted architectural style, a Greek revival, a Queen Anne, folk Victorian, and then sort of similar to what you already have on Arnold Mill Road, what we're calling the vernacular, which is really almost like an old, North Georgia farmhouse. And so all of those would be mandated, and those are the final part of the ordinance. So that concludes my presentation. Again, compared to other overlays in Milton, this is relatively a short one, couple of pages, but it's because so much of the other protections are coming down from the general rural Milton overlay, and we're just customizing those things that are unique to the Arnold Mill Road corridor. And we would welcome any questions that you may have. Yes, sir.
You said with both the Cox Road node and the Chadwick node that the maximum, it would be 31 houses with AG1 on the Cox Road node and then a maximum of 16 cottages on the Chadwick node. Is that correct? Did I read that correctly?
Yes, concept.
Concept.
But even following the AG1, based on just the acreage in there, that's really all you could get anyway.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So then is a multi-use trail necessary for 47?
It's already in the, on the books for that area. The trails plans is already calling it out.
Okay.
So we just incorporated in our plan.
So I see that the city of Milton obviously has influence over GDOT with the Highway 9 project that we're now taking on. Is that kind of the same scenario or the same hope for that the city of Milton would kind of have with this GDOT project, or has that been discussed with Roswell, Alpharetta, Cherokee, where we would abut to it, right?
What Roswell, Cherokee were involved into the planning. I mean, I had invited them to the meeting, but not specifically for the transportation component. We hope by being proactive and documenting the community wishes and adopting the plan, we probably will have more leverage on controlling the design.
Got it. Okay. Okay, great.
Yes, sir.
Is there any more work done on the economic feasibility? Because I know in one of the workshops we had, a number of the landowners were like, first of all, getting this done is one thing, but then making it economically feasible for people that are landowners and businesses and all that. Are those nodes enough to really make it work?
I was not privy to those conversations. I will say, and I may let Gia or staff answer that. This is, from my perspective, the residents of Milton were very focused on density neutrality. And so that is what we are recommending to codify just based on what we heard. You're absolutely correct. There were some property owners who wanted what I would characterize as extremely high density for this corridor. I do think the indication of council that this will never be sewered is pretty much the determining factor. But again, nothing under Georgia law precludes them from filing a rezoning at some point in the future. But we did not feel comfortable. I could not comfortably recommend that to this body or to the city council. Was there an economic analysis, Shubha?
No, because I think this was intended to be more land use focus study. So we were not really told to do any kind of economic analysis for.
And then also this vision, I think just the risk of repeating ourselves the fifth time, this is no more commercial square footage than like the comprehensive land use plan has for this area.
Correct. When you read the rural Milton overlay, there are some allowances for non-residential uses in certain locations in it. And Gia and Nick, the folks that draw the drawings, I don't do the pretty pictures, but they were very deliberate about making sure that every use they talked about matched that, with one exception, which is the sort of country inn. I think that the fact that that's not a single building and it's shown as multiple cottages, that would require, potentially some zoning changes again, but it's all a concept plan and there's not a real builder. It's a vision.
I appreciate you guys sticking to that.
Yeah, of
working
course.
with that and making that a backbone for us. Thank you.
I'd like to dive a little bit into the commercial, not a lot of it, but the commercial area, and helping to understand or visualize if it's street facing, the storefront has to be facing the street, and that needs to be the main entrance from what I'm reading. The parking needs to be in the rear. Rear entrances are allowed. Help me visualize how that would look if it's a restaurant that wanted outdoor seating.
Well, it would be very similar to a lot of the newer construction at Birmingham. They have similar provisions where the parking has to be in the rear. They could do outdoor seating in the front. There's nothing in here that would prohibit that. But they would probably, you'd probably walk around the side or park like you have on Crabapple, where you park and you walk through a breezeway and then you go in from the side. Gia, do you want to talk about the rendering? We actually can pull it back up if.
Yeah, that might help.
And also, we always have a minimum and maximum front setback for those
There
like
you go,
commercial buildings. So they can always go all the way up to maximum and then have some kind of patio seating in the front.
Yeah.
So
So,
that's where it would come in front of us and then we'd be able to look at it and say yes or no.
Yeah.
so I'll speak from the code perspective and you can talk about the design. So this is the Cox Road. So the way they've laid it out, they've actually put a new roadway in there. And the idea is that the commercial uses would likely front that roadway, not directly front Arnold Mill Road, in the spirit of keeping it more rural. She's has some on-street parking, I believe, internal to that, and rear parking, but not along Arnold Mill Road itself. The idea is to make sure that Arnold Mill Road itself feels much more rural than what we have here on Crabapple Road, where the buildings come right up to the street. So if they did that internally, that would be permitted, but really that rural view shed on Arnold Mill Road, for the most part, is intended to preserve it as rural feeling. Do you want anything to add? Or did I?
Yeah, you basically talked about it.
So is the pink is the commercial? The
Yes,
pink
yes,
bricks?
ma'am. So in this rendering, there are sort of houses along the edge, and then that little bit of pink or red in the middle is a very small commercial area.
That's really part of a master planning, right? I mean,
Yes.
those secondary streets would have.
They would have to go in, yeah. And the other thing about this is it is a state highway, so the state is very particular about curb cuts, and so that was why we put them off of that as well.
And the styles the building styles that were selected, most of them had pitched roofs. Are any of them amenable to like a covered porch or even a rooftop dining?
Rooftop dining? Is that what you said? I will defer to Bob on that one.
These are just photos of residential
Yeah.
style homes.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing about architectural style, and I think I mentioned this several years ago when we were doing the crabapple updates. Most of the architectural styles Milton uses are house architectural styles. So when an applicant comes in and they want to do something that is commercial, there's a little bit of administrative discretion in the code. We did put in here that they have to have pitched roofs. We feel that that's one of the architectural characters. So I don't know how they could really have a rooftop patio with a pitched roof.
Yeah, that was the step I was taking. Yeah.
But there are requirements in the code for porches. So they may not look exactly like these, but these are general architectural styles that the city architect uses to evaluate whether a building conforms or not.
Yeah, I just think, since you're somewhat trying to echo Birmingham Crossroads, the outdoor dining option is very popular.
Yes.
Now, in most cases, it's either covered by a pergola, it's a tent, or a wraparound covered porch. But that seemed, and I just wanted to make sure when you start getting into where's the front entrance and where's the patio seating.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that the only thing we've regulated with regard to porch, and this was Bob's idea, so kudos. We wanted to make sure that the porches had a certain depth, that they weren't just sort of these tacked on porches. So we coded for a minimum of 8 feet, but it would be very possible to do something that was a residential style with a more gracious porch for covering. That is very consistent with the vernacular that is historically found in Milton. And then things like pergolas, I mean, those are going to be accessory structures. We may need to chat with staff about whether a pergola in the front yard would be allowed. And whether
If it's connected to the.
if it's connected, yeah.
Then it becomes a type of.
Part of the
porch.
structure.
We just have them connected. I don't think there's any point to have a detached pergola when you have pretty confined areas.
Yeah, and I know some of the frustration from some members of the Planning Commission have been, you have these outdoor porches, but to make them 4 seasons, they want to put some kind of
Or the plastic curtains.
things. And do we want to say this is allowed and this isn't and make it clear? Or do we want to continue to have them come and say, no, not like that?
That's actually a really good point.
I think that's a good point.
We don't have anything about that. So
Yeah.
we could certainly write some language to do that because, that's how people do it. Oh, it's going to be covered, and then they fill it in, and it's open
Yeah.
365
It's
days a
always
year.
an after fact, and they do have to get the fire department's approval for that, because if they're going to heat
But
it.
many times people just throw them up without asking
Yeah.
for permission or seeking any kind of design guidance. And then I think that somebody was talking the other day about the doors, or the windows that are solid.
Sliding windows, yeah.
Yeah,
sliding,
that
yeah.
possibly, I don't know.
Is that what you guys would recommend, to have not plastic? Because we're looking for.
I look to the other side of the room. I just feel from a code standpoint, I'd rather have it codified than us saying, no, not that.
We've only had a handful, if even that, have actually come in front of the design review board to ask for it. And I think the ones that we have been okay with are the ones that are removable, to where you don't essentially see them unless it is inclement weather and they're not permanent, to where they could remove those.
Yeah. But I know you've had some things you don't
Putting
want,
something in there.
if it is covered, whether it's an awning or an actual roof and all that sort of thing. And it's just
Yeah,
not
the ones that we've
specified here.
approved have been steel structures, permanent structures that they're requesting to have at least some sort of weatherproof kind of screening during inclement weather. I've kind of been keeping an eye on at least 2 that I know of that have kept it open and non-visual from the street when it's nice weather outside. So.
But I think there is some problems, and it would be helpful, maybe even something to look at in general, to have
guidelines onto exactly what it is that's usable for that.
Has the planning commission or I don't know if you grant conditions, but are there any written conditions that the city has prepared that speak to that, or would you like us just to take a
I
stab
guess
at
if
it?
you can take a
Yeah,
stab
we
Okay.
at
can
it.
look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just know when we don't like it.
Then you just put it in front of us.
Yeah.
I have a question. The houses that you were just showing, the vernacular, stuff, these are for the commercial aspects, right? To kind of.
They're everything. Yeah.
So if we're at AG1 and it's a single family residential, then I thought that we weren't privy to that. Or is it because it's in the overlay district?
It's because it would be in the overlay.
So just playing devil's advocate, and this may be taboo being on the design review board, is that those are going to be done in two separate applications. You're not going to have a developer come in and develop commercial and then sell off 1 acre lots. It's going to have to be a conglomerate of two different things. And so if that's the case, and then it becomes two separate parcels, but it's still in the overlay district, there would still be architectural guidelines on that.
Yes, so that's how, yeah,
Even
that's
though
how
it's only
Birmingham
30,
Crossroads is. So that's how we did the south,
Or
the
if you're-
southeast quadrant that has one commercial and future second commercial across from Birmingham Methodist. And then behind it are higher density, smaller lots, and then AG1. But we review every single house to make sure it conforms. It's a little bit different because there was a zoning modification, but the premise was that both the commercial and the single family was going to have a certain architecture.
Similar to the Mayfield district as well, where it's whether it's residential or
Right,
commercial,
right.
there's
Yeah.
a style.
I think my only, just playing devil's advocate concern is it's not necessarily on the Cox Road node, but on the Chadwick node, all these restrictions and limitations to a developer that essentially going to have a hard time selling product next to a landfill. That's really my only kind of.
While the
Yes.
cottages on the Chadwick node, they are not residential. They are part of the country inn.
Okay, they are. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, then that settles that.
Yeah.
The landfill is closed too.
Yeah, how long until that becomes a park?
30 years.
30 years.
All right, so we got some time.
Your children's children.
Here we go.
I have one more question, probably more for staff. We need a lot of work on urban growth boundaries, correct? To try to give another barrier to sprawl, to urban sprawl, to commercial. I don't remember, we did not have anything in Arnold Mill area, did we?
We excluded that from the boundary
Right.
because the council wanted to keep it not septic only, so we did not.
So if we do these two nodes,
Mhm.
would those nodes be added to that? Should that be
No.
added? No? Okay,
These are septic.
Still septic.
okay.
The discussion also when I was on the Urban Growth Boundary Committee, and the discussion is, I can't set a boundary until the plan is done. So they do the plan, and then we can see if it makes sense. But since we are doing it with a special overlay district, we're handling how it's developed that way. So I don't see that you would necessarily.
For this particular area, yes,
Yeah.
that was a
For the
confusion.
Chadwick node specifically.
Any other questions?
I have a question. What's the setback on the Birmingham overlay for commercial?
It's pretty
It
close.
is, it's pretty close.
20
Yeah,
feet,
I would
maybe?
have to look it up. It's because the idea at Birmingham, it's a crossroads, and traditionally those buildings are close to the street, just like here. And you see the older buildings here in Crabapple, and we try to imitate that. So I
mean,
think
the
it's like
ones that-
maximum 20 feet,
Yeah.
if that.
Max,
Yeah.
and is this one 40 feet? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, 40-foot minimum.
My concern with that is, I just feel if someone wants to build off the street, they have a 40-foot setback, and then they have to have parking in the rear or on the side. It's going to be very hard unless they have a, what did you call those? Inner road, an internal road system that would have to be part of a master plan or something.
Well, I think it's part of this whole concept of preserving the rural view shed. And so I would say that Crabapple used to be called Crabapple Crossroads, and then Birmingham Crossroads those were nodes that were at an intersection in the sense of they were traditionally, the buildings were up to, close to the street, whereas I believe in this area, the Cox Road node, I think the goal is to keep it a rural view shed and keep it as natural as possible. So you're right, it would take a lot more land than, to be able to accomplish all these things. But I think it's what, the direction has gone to do.
Well, okay, so we have 20,000 vehicles per day that cross both of these nodes, right?
Mhm.
And we are anticipating more pedestrian traffic as well, or not really?
With the multi-use trail.
I don't know, I feel like a lot of those zero lot lines, or however you want to say it, with the buildings close to the trails, it's a lot easier for people, for business to come. And maybe that's not what we want. I'm just bringing that up as a concern.
I think that's why there's a couple different concepts. There's a concept that includes more a commercial node, and then there's a purely just residential. So we're not saying, I believe that we'll let the
So
the market
non-residential,
dictate it. Yeah.
this sort of shows, and I breezed over this. So it would be 40 feet for non-residential. It would be 100 feet for residential. So that you do get some landscaping. It is probably it's twice the distance of the liner buildings in front of Publix at Birmingham, the long one. But yeah, we can.
But do remember that this is actually the highway, and it's going to be a multi-lane highway versus Crabapple or Birmingham roads are not the state highways, So they would rather want to be a little bit further than the road than just right next to.
But what's the purpose of having 40 foot for commercial and 100 foot for residential?
I think 40 foot is already there. We just didn't move it. Was it that? 40 feet is already there
For C1.
for C1 commercial one. We are just explaining it in here. The 100 foot is the newer
more restrictive one.
regulation for rural use shed.
And we're really only talking about like 15 houses, right? That would back up against.
But you will really feel the difference if you lose the trees on that road.
Yeah, no.
And to your point, I was about to mention that. It really is. There's a spacing at which trees don't grow very well, and typically, 30 feet is deemed in a setting like this is a good space. So, again, if the Planning Commission and DRB, if you're interested in us coming back with a reduced number, we can certainly look at that. But we do feel that 40, in addition to keeping the current standard, is really going to make sure that the trees can grow and become usable over the long term. These properties are pretty big. So I don't feel that it imposes a hardship. With all due respect, it may impose a visibility hardship, but I think we've made sure that they're buildable. That's what Gia is so good at. She works with real developers in other communities and knows what kind of layouts do and do not work, and so she's been very deliberate about that.
Kind of brings me to the next point. The Birmingham Crossroads, the staff and the BZA have spent more time than they needed to on signage regulations. And I notice it's silent here about signage. So we probably should state how big can they be? When can they be lit? Because I know at Birmingham Crossroads, it's intentionally not very big. They just allowed it to be bigger, but it's still relatively small. It's not you don't put up a 10-foot sign on the roadway.
So you think
that's a very good point. I think we can just have a look at the signage particularly again, and then we can bring in the similar sign.
Wasn't there something in this proposal that talks about signage?
No, it deferred to the general rule.
Yeah, we have
signage
general.
standards.
One thing sitting here trying to visualize 100-foot setback in residential. If, I don't know, when Arnold Mill Road would be changed, but if a developer comes in and we approve that, what's that gonna look like if you have 100-foot setback at the present Arnold Mill Road? Seems to me to really be a struggle at 100 feet.
Well, it's already, especially since it's septic, if you're going from 150, down to 100, and I get it makes a good point is you're getting really tight on where your septic is.
Right.
For a 5-bedroom or a 5-bedroom home, a 4.5 bath or something, you're going to have at least 200 feet, linear feet of a leach field, which is 50-foot minimum as far as the health department is concerned. So, and then based on topography and stuff like that as well. I think those are things that come into play, but that's why I was asking, could the developer decide whether he wanted to do the 100-foot versus the 150-foot? And then is that interchangeable as well? So if the lots alongside or that back up to Arnold Mill, could they do those at the 100-foot wide, but then the ones opposite of that be 150-foot wide to allow for more?
Well, again, they can make them as wide as they want.
Yep.
That's their discretion. We do have, to your point about septic, we do have a provision in there, which is under page 661.
Yeah.
We allow for location in the rural view shed if there is no other suitable location. They just have to have an engineer tell them, so that would be a by right situation. We wanted to make it so they didn't have to get a variance if that was the only site that perked well and was sort of where it should go. But I do think I would recommend, in terms of the 100-foot rural view shed, you probably don't want to let people opt out of that, because that is so foundational to all of the engagement process, is making sure that that feels rural. And I think even if you have one or two sections where the buildings are pulled up to the street, it's going to change the character.
Yep.
Again, it's your community. We will do whatever the community wants, but I do know there was a lot of discussion in the planning process about just how wide that's going to be.
I'm just trying to visualize driving down there. I know there is some wooded areas, but I know that there's also some cleared areas
Yep.
as well. So if you have that 100-foot rural shed and there's 2 or 3 lots that have 0 trees on them, you're
He'll
still
see 'em.
seeing the back of the
He'll
house.
see
It's
'em.
just 100 foot away now instead of 60 foot,
Yep.
right? So I would think there may be a better compromise to where you have to plant certain things, or you have to have a minimum requirement of vegetation or some sort of tree canopy. And then if you don't have that, then maybe you're required to plant to kind of make some sort of vegetation, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Within reason.
And unless it's a pasture with a barn.
Exactly.
Because I'm trying to remember, like along Birmingham Highway, if someone's going to build a house, it has to be at least 60 feet back from the highway. Some of them are Tracy, sorry. Some of them are closer because they've been that way, but
Well, it
But-
really
but-
depends
so if
on
you think about it-
subdivision or not subdivision, right?
that 60 feet still seems, for the size of house, still seems close to the road. So I think 100 probably makes more sense, because along Birmingham Highway, those new houses are like, ooh, that's close to the road. I wouldn't want my house that close, personally.
The right of way of Arnold Mill. I agree with you. I don't think anyone wants to have back up to
Yeah.
4-lane
Right
highway.
way varies. There are, some places are just the 50 feet. Some places are 70 feet.
So between 50 and 70.
So we were talking about if we do a 4-lane highway plus a grass strip plus a multi-use path, we're
The
going to have
average is
some
about
eminent
100
domain
to
anyway, right?
120.
Yeah, it's going to be 100 to 120 feet.
So that
depending.
would essentially be from the new
Center line.
proposed
Generally central
right
line.
of way.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we've assumed sort of a symmetrical widening. So, if GDOT ever comes, part of it'll be in the adjacent jurisdiction, but everything is measured from the current center point,
Got it. Okay.
center line. Well, great. Are there any further comments? I will repeat my marching orders, just to be clear. So we're going to look at standards for handling outdoor dining with a couple of concerns related to it becoming sort of year-round use, plastic enclosure, issues of pergola, so we'll look at that. We'll look at signage is another very important point. Is there, I know we're not taking a vote per se, but is there interest in changing the rural view shed from 100 or keeping it as is? Yes, ma'am.
They could go back further.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Well, it had to be 1 acre minimum, so which means if you had 100-foot frontage, you'd have 435 foot and a half from front to back. So if you just took up 100 of that rural shed, then you'd still have 352 feet by 100 feet of buildable area. And I think that's why they're proposing having, instead of, you could build over the building line as long as you're the 50-foot minimum from the adjacent, structure. To offer flexibility in the case that there's.
That's right. Some give and take, because we want to have certain kind
I
of.
like that. I like incentives, yeah.
From a timing step, it's been to the CCIM?
Yes, CZIM was last week or the week
Yeah,
before?
last week,
I believe it's going to be advertised for
March 26th.
March 26th.
To
Yep.
Planning Commission.
Yep. So had to push it back a month. But that'll give us plenty of time to make these revisions as well.
So since it's already been to the CCIM, we in the Planning Commission would have to recommend, staff would have to recommend the additions for signage and outdoor dining, and
Yeah,
then we could comment
There would be a
on the
new
revisions.
version, and so obviously
there will
we
be,
would publish it ahead of time before the planning commission and all that. So, yeah.
So let me ask you, do you like the signage on the Birmingham, in the Birmingham overlay district, or do you want anything robust?
I would say, in my personal opinion, because the signage requirements are different on each corner, I would go with the southwest corner standards.
So that will also need to be an amendment to the sign ordinance, so is that correct, or is that in the overlay?
Yeah, no, we have to do a sign ordinance in the UDC.
We'd have to do it at another
Yeah.
Yeah.
time. We couldn't do it concurrently.
Yeah, so I believe in the case of the Birmingham overlay, the signage is an overlay.
No,
It's in the signage.
It's by itself.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
It
never
used to
mind.
be long ago.
Long ago.
Robin, at present, the gas station that's going in, the signage will follow our normal.
For whatever the rural Milton
Rural,
is.
okay.
Yeah.
And maybe take a look at it. It might be one of those that the rural Milton overlay signage is fine, but I know it caused quite consternation in lots of BZA meetings, multiple ones, when one wanted a lollipop sign and the other one wanted a bigger sign.
I mean, I don't think that each corner has a different regulation. It's just how it's been interpreted or how it was built. So the whole overlay district of Birmingham signage should be the same. It's just.
Should be, yeah.
Yeah. So.
One snuck in early, maybe.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. This was really productive.
Thank you.
Yeah. Doing Deerfield now.
And the standards are not the same.
Yeah, that's normally all we do.
Am I up? All right. I'm just going to talk from here. All right, well, good evening. Everybody knows me. I'm Bob Buscemi, Director of Special Projects. I want to welcome both members of the DRB and Planning Commission. It's nice to have a joint meeting. Getting great feedback. I want to just take a moment and reorient your thinking to the other side of town. We've been talking so much about Arnold Mill and the ruralness of Arnold Mill. So I got to kind of like recalibrate everybody in this room, which is not an easy thing to do at 8 o'clock at night, although the weather's been cooperating. Okay, we're talking about Deerfield, right? So Deerfield is a destination. Most think of Milton as a rural, large lot community, but the Deerfield experience is captivating. Easy access to 400, both large and small retail stores, restaurants, places of employment. It is our economic engine. Buildings like the Public Safety Complex and the Deerfield Park being designed currently, a public trail system, open green space, marks the city's commitment to enhancing this district. Our great schools, low crime rate, and now the enhancement of the Highway 9 corridor. After all the community engagement that we conducted, the people that live in this district expressed how much they love living here. They said, Bob, we're happy to call Deerfield their home. This implementation plan is defining the connection to Milton and adding cultural amenities to be enjoyed by all who move to Milton. Okay, with that said, hopefully that recalibrated you. You could say it, wow, great job. That's okay. I don't mind a compliment. Okay, with that said, let me just give you a quick update of where we are in the project. The project schedule currently right now, we're honestly running about 2 to 3 weeks behind. I think we lost a good solid week at Thanksgiving and about 2 weeks at Christmas. We're working really hard to make that up. Overall, I think the project schedule will be there. Cooper Carey and staff has committed to really working. We're working day and night to really maintain that schedule. So we're currently in phase 3. So phase 2 stopped at December 31st, and now we're entering into phase 3 as of January 1st. And there's 2 main items in phase 3 that I want to touch on. One is the development of the final version of the design manual. We transmitted to you all a draft copy, which I'll admit still needs more work. It was draft. And we are scheduling a follow-up on February 26th for another joint meeting to review this manual. And whatever feedback we get tonight, we'll include into the manual. So the manual is still a working document. It's still alive and going, and will probably mold. The purpose of the manual is important. We have code, but when developers come in, we wanted to show them graphically what things would look like and the imagery we're looking to achieve. Kind of helps staff stay in alignment with what we're looking to build out. The second one is code text amendments. I want to invite everybody in this room. We're meeting with the Planning Commission, so you'll be there, and Council next Monday, the 10th, to discuss several code items that staff needs specific direction on. There are other text items, but the 5 items that we want specific direction on is what we're looking to achieve at that workshop. And I will be sending out that presentation, which outlines those 5 very specific text items to everybody this week to make sure that you see it before the meeting. Just some other schedule updates on the project. Last night, council did approve a 6-month extension to the current moratorium. I think this is going to give staff and the city a little bit more time to make sure that all our code text amendments are vetted by the boards and the council and implemented. It'll probably make things a whole lot easier for the developers at the end, because if we didn't extend it, then the developer would have to come in and say, oh, look, I need variances and rezonings and things like that. So this way, at least staff has the initiative, and we could take direction from the council and the boards. The other update would be GDOT. The cleanup has gone well. They've done all the cleanup on Highway 9, but we've also recently, in the month of January, directed GDOT to go back and restore all the fencing. So the four-board horse fencing, now they never agreed to do the piers, so they're not going to rebuild piers, and they're not going to replant trees, but they will fix the fencing. They're getting somebody in there to do it. It's just not been scheduled yet, but I've been monitoring that. Then at the State of the City, the mayor announced that Milton will be assuming the management of the roadway project in its entirety, and this will allow Milton to design the project with our priorities incorporated. These priorities were important to us. It was like limiting speed limit to 35 miles an hour, landscaping, especially in the medians, road alignments to preserve existing landscape. So they were just going in and chopping down landscape. We're going to be realigning the road slightly, and we can maintain all that landscaping that's mature and existing. Sidewalks and crosswalks, pedestrian experience along the corridor, and a slew of other things, but those are the main ones. We'll be looking at it, and we'll be putting that together. So tonight, our presentation really targets specific items that we need your feedback on. This will help us polish the design manual. We just want to note, it is important to keep Milton. Architecture and site placement of buildings plays an important role in this. Our style is unique and contributes into our placemaking identity. I would like to thank all the members of both Planning Commission and Design Review Board for maintaining that level of quality within Milton. You have no idea. I think these boards are fantastic. You guys are great. You've been doing a wonderful job. I'm looking forward to all your feedback because you guys have been so engaged, and I'm really happy to see that. We do require 360-degree architecture, so if we show you a picture of the front of a building, it is the city standard to make sure that the entire building wrap around, all those elevations, maintain the same level of quality. So even though we may just show you the front, it is our standard to do that. So with that, I'll ask Cooper Carey to get up. I think we have some good visuals to share with you tonight.
Is the video
on? We have a little video we're going to show you first, like a walkthrough, kind of get an idea of what things might look like. Yes, I approve the music.
He didn't, but I picked
Bet
up.
you did, Bo.
Do you want to just describe what they're looking at?
So this is a retail store. Again, these are some images that you've seen before. This is a depiction of what Highway 9 can look like in the retail along Highway 9, particularly in the South Highway 9 subdistrict. So think around where the Target is. But this also shows sidewalk, the trail, the multi-use trail with some golf cart parking, some service for that retail hidden by landscape, opportunities for outdoor dining. This is what the multi-use trail would look like through the web preserve. So again, you still get that contrast. There's some a little bit more development and activity, and then there's areas of quiet in Deerfield. This offers the opportunity of a little bit more active, but not leaving behind that beauty of Milton that is defined by the tree canopy. This is just out of view is the lake at the Verizon site. So if you look kind of through the trees, you can see potential redevelopment on the Verizon site, but this is a boardwalk trail along that lake. So that what is right now sort of stormwater management, it's not really useful. It becomes an amenity. And this is what you can think of as a plaza. So you could see this. So just beyond those trees is the multi-use trail. This is a plaza for potentially, if there's a hotel or multifamily or residential office, that's just kind of showing what some of the activity could look like. So to Bob's point, we have a couple of things that we wanted to get your feedback on. But I think that, as Bob said, the residents, we had a lot of great engagement, as you all know, and as I have reported to you. One thing is consistent that we heard, which is better connectivity and more activity, the opportunity to walk to activity nodes and enjoy community building spaces. Right. So it was, and then also let's not use what's great about Deerfield, which is, you do have a Target, you have that convenience retail. So how can you maintain some of those more auto dominant uses while layering in something that's more walkable and granular and is also uniquely Deerfield and uniquely Milton? And one of the things we talked a lot about too, and we've talked about here, is how does it reflect Milton and how is it maybe a little bit different than crabapple? And that's, some of that is that's very subtle, but is it the same, but just a little different because it's Deerfield. So one of the defining elements that really is important about the urban design manual, and it happens in your form-based code as well, which is that it's very clear that you're layering in improved connectivity. And how does that happen? You shift from a suburban street network, which existed in Deerfield before the city of Milton, right? So how do you begin to use these redevelopment opportunities to add layers of streets that are walkable, but also give the opportunity to layer in different types of commercial uses, potentially some residential uses, and hospitality, hotel. You can start to think about the most flexible redevelopment chassis is a good network of streets and blocks. And so that's really the shift that we want to make. One of the other fundamental items of the urban design manual is how do you think about that not one size fits all in Deerfield. So the Highway 9 is the spine of Deerfield, and we know that. But it's very different on the south side where Walmart is to the very north side where Crooked Creek is. Those are two very different experiences, but they are also connected and are one Deerfield. So we really started to think about how we could create something that is connected but offers the North Deerfield is really has a stronger residential presence and less commercial. So there is a little bit of commercial that exists there today, and we don't want to get rid of that. But we also know that that's just character-wise is going to be less intense activity than further south. Central Deerfield, that's a actually really well-developed node. As you have the public safety complex, you have Publix, you have Pike. You also have a really great opportunity in the redevelopment. As Bethany Bend is realigned, you can create a lot of park space with the old Bethany Bend right-of-way. So you really just want to strengthen that as a neighborhood commercial node. That's not where your regional commercial is, say like your Targets. That's really where you go when you live nearby and you want to, you're on your way home and you want to go get, excuse me, what we call neighborhood convenience. Now, South Highway 9 and South Deerfield Parkway are really where the larger scale redevelopment opportunities exist.
that's where the mixed use redevelopment opportunities are to shore up your commercial district. And South Deerfield also offers an opportunity for other types of commercial redevelopment that don't currently exist, like light industrial, which is allowed in your code. So that's not changing anything about the code. It's just, how can you imagine that happening in South and the South Deerfield Parkway area, but also potentially high-tech uses. So we have we want to talk a little bit about that last point, which is the light industrial, because it is something that you don't currently have a lot of. How do you make that, how does that look Milton, and how do you make that Milton-esque while also attracting, these are commercial uses and it shores up your commercial tax base. So again, what you see up on the screen is some light industrial that exists in Roswell and Alpharetta. And you probably drive by this light industrial and don't really know that it is light industrial with truck courts in the back. So there is a way to incorporate this as a good urban environment without compromising the form that you want for the city of Milton. But buildings, so in that, integration into the street, and we talked about this a little bit with Arnold Mill as well. So buildings should still have a strong relationship to primary and secondary streets. No parking in front, as we've talked about, relationship to walkability, and you want to keep the loading and truck courts hidden from view. And again, we've talked about this, and we've talked about, Bob has talked about this a little bit with the council members and with the community. These are low nuisance uses that can be integrated into a walkable mixed use environment. They provide some commercial activity for local residents, but also can attract maybe potentially more high-tech users that offer employment at really high-level employment. So the other aspect that can be incorporated into this is also self-storage, and what you see on the screen is self-storage that exists here in Milton. It feels residential. So I think that's what we want to communicate with light industrial and these other commercial uses, is that there's still a connectivity to that residential look, as you just talked about with Honor Mill, kind of setting the tone for commercial development. One of the things that we think about potentially with industrial uses is that the buildings could be really large. But the reality is, and as you saw, and I'll go back to this, is that you can actually keep I think what's really important for Milton is to keep the facade lengths shorter, and they can be long buildings in the back hidden from the street with primary entrances on the public right of way. So it feels like a showroom. You can think of it like a showroom with a warehouse behind. And here's an example of one nearby in Smyrna. You can see that you can actually have Milton-esque design features like cornice lines and high materials and even civic space that bring in a feel of something that's not your traditional industrial park, and would attract a higher end user for that light industrial. But the details are important, just as everything else that you review, and as it will be important. So what is not what you want to see? So here's what we don't want to see and what doesn't belong. Really, this is nice materials. This is, entrances facing onto a walkway, but it's really too long and too uniform, and it communicates a size and an out of scale that doesn't quite fit with the finer grain that we want to communicate in Milton. So again, we come back to the design details. What's really important for light industrial is that you really continue to emphasize pedestrian walkways that connect to primary streets, but also to in between buildings and to parking. You want roof lines on the primary facade that are varied potentially. You want to provide cornice lines. You want to use pitch or projections to create visual interest. Yes, you can have a pitched roof on the front side of an industrial building. And you want to have windows and doors that indicate clear entrances and create visibility. Again, something that's not blocked off in just a paneled building. And you really, I think it's important to say that though this is industrial, you want the materials and the details similar to that of other uses. So they're, again, kind of going back to that same, the residential feel of Milton is the lead and what other uses take their cues from in terms of the detailing of the building. Yeah.
So obviously, like we had discussed before in some of these Zoom calls, was is it just the front facing of those? And if you've got a loading dock, obviously the back is going to
That's
not
right.
be subject to any kind of
That's right. That's right. And what you really want to do is create an internal court. So just as Bob was talking about, it's a 360 view. Think of it like a block. And so you want the blocks of the industrial buildings. There's a 360 view that is better designed, and the trucks are interior. And really with this level, the buildings are about 80 feet deep, but the truck court is enough that just inside that courtyard, it's truck movements. And again, this is not a Walmart distribution center level truck movements. This is the showroom, somewhat smaller warehouses.
And that's in the south.
That's in South Deerfield. Yeah, I think, and really thinking about particularly the site where what we call the H building is located, which is right on 400. That's probably a very likely site because of its proximity, and the back of the site backs up to 400. So you're shaded from, you're not near you don't share a property line with residential uses. To the south is property owned by Northside Hospital, which probably eventually may be medical office one day. So, there's that just seems amenable. And one other example of something that doesn't belong. So this image, this is actually a pretty high quality, these are high quality materials, but as you can see, they're really not in line with what is Milton-esque. So I think the other thing, so it's not just being high quality materials and a pitch roof, it is really thinking about the cornice line, the materiality, the colors as it relates to, the whole of Milton. And so here's a 3D massing of what that could look like. And I think what's important is that creating that sense of the buildings are broken down a bit on Morris Road and Webb Road. So what you see feels like an approachable scale. Now, in most instances, these buildings are not high, tall buildings, but some of them in the back could be taller. And we've talked about making provisions for that, depending on some high-tech users do have some really high ceiling to ceiling heights. You can think of some pharmaceutical users that might be someone that you would want to attract in the long term. Potentially some of those users would like a tall building, but that would be off of the primary streets and really not visible from any of the public right-of-ways. This rendering does also show what could be either a data center or a larger facility that's 400 to 500 feet long. How does that begin to fit in? And what we've talked about, that again, putting that in a place that is not visible from where the walkable, granular uses are. So, with the right architecture, are there any concerns about encouraging light industrial in the district? Okay.
I'd make a comment.
Judy.
Based on some of our, I think going back 2 years now, concern about smell and light.
So nuisance is that,
sign,
that
nuisance,
low
yeah.
nuisance verbiage and light, Robin, I don't know, we didn't get into that detail, but we did talk about the low nuisance. And again, these are allowed uses, so it's
Right,
already
that's
in
what I
your
was gonna
code.
say. It's already in the
Code,
In the
code
code.
to allow these uses, so yeah.
But I think saying that in many places as possible is always helpful.
Well, we'll address that.
Yeah, we'll make
We're
sure.
doing zoning code, some minor changes, and I'll make sure that we put some protections in for that, so that when we're saying light industrial, if somebody comes in, right? And then, if they come in, that it would have to be clean light industrial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when
With
I
the
worked for a
frame plans.
consulting company, and they made, when I worked in a consulting company, it was for an international flavors company. And, it sounds really good, but bacon was the flavor of the day. It smelled good for about the first 30 minutes. By 2 o'clock, it was like, oh, will that ever go away?
I used to.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Where they make Big Red and all the gums is not far from where I grew up, and so you could always tell, oh, it's Big Red today, or it's Juicy Fruit today. So,
But it's an important point, Judy, because,
Yeah.
it's in the code, and somebody might come in and say, oh, I want to do some light industrial. So we wanted to explore what it would look like and add those types of protections, so that if they do come in with it, and it is as of right, that, it's in the code, that we'd be able to have those protections, so that.
What are some examples of light industrial?
bad examples.
But what are some examples?
Oh, so one really good one that is probably related is, say progressive lighting, where they have, some of them are a pretty showroom, but they have the showroom in front that's really visible, and behind it's a warehouse where they are storing all the lighting fixtures. A lot of furniture shops,
Retail up front, and then they have their warehouse. in
It's
the
like a
back.
public, yep.
Retail.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's an example. Some of the ones, the plan that I showed you, let me go back. So these, they look like office storefronts. So there's a spa company. So it may not be retail, but it's office at the front. That's what's street facing. And then, it's a spa warehouse behind, plumbing, if you can think about any sort of company that has a public facing office that's relatively small, but the warehouse really needs to be relatively large, and I think the magic spot is about 15, can be 15,000, 25,000 square feet total. It's, some of them are, you can even have, like, for instance, this one, these are multiple tenants in these buildings. It's not just one light industrial user. So just like that you would do in a retail building where it gets broken up, and sometimes the way it gets broken up changes, that's often what happens in this scale of light industrial.
And if you look at the self-storage that we did on Web, it has a loading dock in the back, but we hid it, so nobody even knows it's there. And then it's a 4-story architecture. But if you really look at the building, I mean, it looks 2- and 3-story. It looks like there's dormers. We pitched a roof, and then we made the 4th floor in back of that pitched roof. So yeah, just use it as an example when people come in to say, you can break down scale. You can make the loading docks, hidden from view. I mean, these things are achievable, and we do have some examples right here in Milton that we've done already. So we're not totally foreign to it. But it was a little bit more money for them. But at the end, they said, Bob, thanks, because it's a much better product and we're happier with it. So there are ways to break down and fake out those scales and protect the, things from view and things like that.
And oftentimes, I think it's really important, these light industrial uses fit really well with a smaller office component, a smaller professional office component, which is actually probably one of the only parts of the office market right now that's, I think, doing well. And so if you look at this is a mixture of light industrial and professional office. So you'll have some light industrial uses shared and just adjacent to a dental office. So, you know, that when you have something, again, that offers that granularity, it actually mixes in much better than, I think you hear industrial and you think, you know, something larger and dirty and chlorine. Yes. Yes. Right. So, the next, oh, sorry.
Sorry, but we got to look at it, Judy, because, you know, I don't want a Amazon warehouse, right? So maybe we need to look at things like limiting building size or number of loading docks or, you know, things that might exclude an Amazon coming in saying, you know, we're going to buy 60 acres and we want to build an Amazon warehouse. Maybe we need to say you can't, like Allison saying, these are multi-tenant examples. And I'm not so sure that I'd be comfortable with an Amazon warehouse coming in trying to claim that they meet our code. You know, so I'll make sure that we add those things in too.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's right. Oftentimes the CrossFit gyms locate in these areas. Any other, before I move on, anything else? Okay, so one of the things that we, you know, I alluded to this when I talked about the North Deerfield district, which is the opportunity for commercial is limited in North Deerfield for a couple of reasons. The largest, really the most, the biggest reason is that the lot depths make it very difficult to fit commercial and parking in many of the redevelopment opportunities that exist on the north, particularly as you think about the widening of Highway 9. So today they're wide enough. In the future, some of these lots are smaller. It lends itself very well to smaller lot residential. And there's an example of this, which is Kensley, which is in the Deerfield district. And I think this is what we're thinking about. Small lots with a mix of single family housing types that are in a street and block network, and particularly infill in North Deerfield. It offers opportunities for character building where there's limited opportunity for meaningful commercial. And this is integration. But what we want to keep consistent with the rest of Deerfield is that there is a significant integration of civic space, so that really became a defining component of the community, which is this opportunity for community gathering space, that for pedestrian forward, well-connected redevelopment. So what does this look like? So this is high quality, smaller footprint. So we talked about this a little bit, I think at a previous DRB meeting, which is, again, you have the high quality materials, thoughtful design that aligns with Milton's architecture, but you have innovating housing types, yet still Milton. So here are just some examples of how that looks in a development with civic space and a real, quite frankly, a very wide variety of housing sizes, which we did hear some in the community feedback that there's not an opportunity to stay in Milton if you don't want to live in a large house. So
let me just quickly lay this scenario out. This is, we're thinking in terms of different sub-districts. The sub-district that we're referencing here would be the most northern sub-district, right? And that's like sites that are going to be like the apple orchard. So when you're going up Highway 9 north, it's on the left of that barbed wire thing. The site's really not deep enough to, we've had commercial uses come in and they just said, Bob, it's just not big enough with the buffers and everything that's there. Any residential use wouldn't have to have those buffers, so that you'd have a lot more space in there, because like 75 plus 10, so it's like 85 feet there, plus the widening of Highway 9 is going to take some room there. So it really narrows those sites. So then we say, well, is retail and office even large enough to be survivable there? So we're looking at it. Right now, we don't allow residential along Highway 9. They don't allow commercial along Highway 9, townhouses, I'm sorry, townhouses along Highway 9. So it's something, that's one of my questions. I'll give you a preamble for next week in front of the council to say, instead of just saying no to, a blanket no to any townhouses or residential on Highway 9, can we look at it maybe in the terms of sub-districts and say, yes, maybe it is appropriate at that sub-district to have 100% residential, small lots, small single-family detached, so we don't have to always have townhouses, right? We can have like a mini Kensley up there. And then as you go down and it does become more intensified, right, the uses as you go south become more intensified, well, then maybe we say no, that there's different mixes of uses, ratios, and then it becomes, a little bit more restrictive as you go further into the more commercial area. You say, no, now we really want mixed use. We really don't want housing down there. We want more commercial. But it doesn't seem like there's a one size fits all along Highway 9 when we looked at it.
Yeah.
And there's your district.
So it would be in the purple district in particular. So especially if you can see, what's across from Crooked Creek. By the time you accommodate the right of way for Highway 9, and then think about just having any kind of infrastructure there, really it only accommodates residential.
Didn't all your market studies anyway talk about do you need more households?
This is
Substantiate all the.
Yeah, I think the commercial, the retail in particular, adding any retail in the North District would probably be hard to. I don't know that you could finance it.
Right.
And the purple currently is zone T2, or is it?
Purple is a T4.
T4, okay, so it's already zone denser.
Yeah, it is the density. We're not proposing to increase density on it.
No.
What we're proposing is just to allow residential, single-family detached residential on it, so that, we can get some residential up in that area and get it built out. Because it really doesn't lend itself to enough square footage of retail that's going to really make an impact or be survivable. I'd rather do that more in the southern sub-districts where we can really concentrate more retail there.
And are you talking quarter-acre lots, 30-acre lots?
Well, they're like whatever we had in Kensley.
It's 5 units per acre, I believe.
About
5 units per acre, so 20.
They were single-family detached. They have 3-car garages, believe it or not. They're like 2-3 stories high, and it just gives it it really does look quite nice. It doesn't have like a harsh look to it. So we said, look, something like that, a smaller scale would actually probably fit right in those northern areas.
For sale?
Yes.
For sale.
Yeah.
Would this be similar in size to what is across from Cambridge? Or smaller?
Cambridge was a little larger. They were wider lots. These would be a little smaller than the Cambridge ones. They'd be more like the Kensley.
Yeah.
Kensley is very successful because it's rear rally fed. So we'd still require that.
Yeah.
Here.
And what you see here, these are all alley fed homes.
Yeah. So Kensley is the one that's along Webb?
That's along Webb.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And I also think a variety of different small lot configurations is also feasible, where you could have some larger and some smaller, but overall the general feel is
which is very similar. If you want, use as an example, we did that up in Birmingham Corners. So if you go there, those are small single-family detached homes. They actually look really nice. If you go up there, architecture looks great. I drive through it. I really think it looks successful. But those are what I call variable lot sizes. Some are 30, some are 35, some are 40. So we could do the same thing. We could say smaller lots, but variable lot size.
Yeah.
Basically like
if that's okay.
downtown Alpharetta. Boise.
Mm-hmm.
Ken just mentioned downtown Alpharetta. One of the things I'm not real thrilled about downtown Alpharetta, it's like, oh, let's shoehorn a house in here. And, it doesn't, some of it looks very nice and planned and pleasing, but some of it looks like, let's adjust the house and put up a wall and do things just to shoehorn it. And I'm thinking more like maybe not on the main street on Canton, but some of those back in there look very, let's see how we can cram them in there.
Which I think part of that is also just how you plan the lots ahead of time, right? Like, so
Right.
that's kind of infilling. These are opportunities to do something like the Kinsley where you go in and it's methodical and you're not.
Those are 0 lot lines, so there really aren't any restrictions other than distance from adjacent structures that those.
Yeah.
And other things we could
Pretty
do.
architecture, but I would never be able to get my truck in and out of it.
Yeah. And again, I think,
But people do like it though.
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
I have another friend that lives in one of those where it's like to get to her house, you go down and it's like, I can't get to your house because once I get there, I can't get out.
Yeah. And so,
Let me ask you,
Walkability.
other things that we could do is say, you're allowed to have single-family detached housing there. However, we do want a linear park along Highway 9 so that the houses aren't right up against Highway
Right.
9. I think that's the point you're making, right? You don't want to see houses smacked up against Highway 9. So maybe we say, okay, we'll allow it, but you have to put a 50-foot linear park that runs the whole frontage of the development so that we can get the sidewalks off of the right-of-way and into the developments a little bit, meander them, put some trees. Tracy can work on making sure that we have like canopy coverage over those sidewalks and things like that. So maybe there's a way we can work that incentive to say, okay, council, if you allow that, but we want 3 things the developer would have to do in order to do it so that we can get those things.
But, and I'm thinking of some of them in Alpharetta too to watch out for. They're effectively a flag lot with a
Okay.
shared driveway
Mm.
that become,
so I think
yeah.
one potential solution is also how you do the alley design requirements,
Right.
because I think that prevents some of that, the
Yeah.
shared driveway and turning around. And what you see here, this is actually, most of these are in Trilith. If you've been there, the alleys are actually quite generous, and you see it a little bit, but Avalon's, some of their alleys are not, they're not quite as well defined. But here it becomes, you can comfortably move a large vehicle, you can comfortably put your trash out, and the front face, and so it's quite maybe a little bit tighter sometimes at the front, but there's generous space to make sure, as you're saying, you're not trying to meander.
The other thing we could do is we could say, look, because a lot of people love housing. I mean, housing sells fast in Milton. We could just say, you could do this, you linear park along the frontage, and then instead of, sometimes these lots, we have 4-acre minimum, 8-acre minimum, but maybe we could say, look, even on, smaller lots, you have to give us more open space so that we end up with some green and they're not just all housing, right? Like you're saying, it's just not all packed in and tight housing, because we are allowing smaller lots and more density, right? Well, not more density, but
yeah,
tighter look to what it normally would be.
We could reduce the hardscape. So the difference between this and like Avalon is in Trilith is they have a large number of reduction in their hardscapes and more vegetation to kind of create those.
They're like a muse. Yeah. And again, I do think I think that's a very good distinction. And I think Trilith is probably a good landscape, an analogous landscape. You want something that is, while it, if I were to show you the aerial of this, you would think, oh my gosh, that's awful, because it looks very tight. But when you're there, it does not feel, these are the images, it doesn't feel quite as tight. And a lot of that is because of how they prioritize landscape at the front, generous alleys at the back, and parking. And They would not recommend doing the slate sidewalks. So just FYI, if you ever want to do a slate, I wouldn't recommend a slate sidewalk. Neither would they, but they really did try to lessen the impact.
That's a good point, Ken. Thanks. Landscaping
Yeah.
will be in there too. I'll make sure we.
Reduction of hardscape, then it reduces
Reduction
of
impervious surface, it's pervious.
Yeah.
Less water retention and all that stuff,
Mhm.
but bear in mind too, Trillis has an unlimited budget too. So
They do. Their margins
it's a little unrealistic.
Their margins are a little different. But what I would say too is that what they found, and I think what you would find in Milton, is that the price points of even the cottages, which are 600 square feet, are astronomical. So just again, there are people who are buying really tiny homes in Trilith because they've left the community and have a primary residence somewhere else, but they still want to have a residence. It's their Fayetteville or Peachtree City is their home. So I'll go to this question. Any concerns with this thought that it's primarily residential, and particularly in the North Deerfield subdistrict?
That far north? No.
Okay. So to our final question or conversation, and that is around multifamily residential. Now, what we know is that this is not going to be a fully multifamily residential plan, but there may be components, really in South Deerfield in particular, but potentially in South Highway 9 that incorporate elements of multifamily residential in the proposals that come with the redevelopment sites. Sorry, click too fast. So we're going to walk you through multifamily because what we want to really get your feedback on is the design components. Should you receive proposals for multifamily? What are the design components that we think are really important? So this picture that you see on the screen is one of the ones that was universally loved by the community, by the planning board, and by the DRB. And what you see is a lot of really great details. This bill, what's really important, and I think this really applies for every new building that is proposed in Deerfield, is that everything needs to be integrated into that block diagram I showed you at the beginning, whether it's an office building or whether it's a residential building with retail, whether it's just a retail building, it needs to be integrated into a street and block network. And what that means is it can't be isolated and it can't and gated. That is not what we want for the future of Deerfield, particularly as it relates to any use. It needs to be in a street and block network. Any multifamily needs to integrate public civic spaces. So not just a private courtyard, but public civic spaces as a component of how it integrates into the community. The building entrance, the lobby, the residential units, again, integrated and addressing the primary and secondary streets. And the other element of this is that multifamily residential, depending on the type of building, it does offer the opportunity to reduce surface parking. So we want to incentivize structured parking wherever possible, and the reduction of surface parking. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of what it means to have what we think is going to be important. So again, I think this applies to every use that we talk about in Deerfield, is we want to avoid long, flat facades. We want to create changes in plane, materials, and building breaks. And that's what you see in the images that everyone loved through our meetings, all incorporated those elements. And you don't want to have a building that's really longer than, say, around 200 feet without some significant architectural breaks. That could be a change in plane, a significant feeling change in plane. It could be a true building break. And the scale. And I think this, again, we want to think about this in the South Highway 9 and South Deerfield subdistricts. We want to limit, I think the height limited to 4 to 6 stories. And I think Bob talked a lot about, and I'm going to go into this a little bit, but Bob talked about how that, how the self-storage building that you already have, it feels like 3 stories on the street, but it's actually 4 stories. We want to start incorporating something that feels from the street a little less, it doesn't feel like 6 stories or 4 stories, but there's a setback from a primary street, so it starts to feel a little bit lower scale. And then, of course, respecting, there is not a lot of sites in Deerfield to which this applies, but we do want to make sure, again, that there's a setback from a shared property line with residential. So I want to give some context to start to think about what multifamily, again, there's not a perfect example of what we think you should have in Milton, either in architecture or in plan together combined. So I'm going to kind of walk you through a couple of thoughts. One of the things that came up a lot in the community engagement was that people love to go to Alpharetta City Center. Now, what do they love about that? They weren't talking about the architecture. They were talking about the experience of the mix of uses and the public spaces and the activity that they could experience. So that, I want to preface this with, they weren't saying I love the multifamily there and that's what I want in Deerfield, right? But I did want to kind of relate to you that is about 26 acres. It's 168 multifamily units with 118,000 square feet of retail. The buildings, so if you see in plan, the wider buildings are the multifamily buildings, and they are about 250 to 230 and 230 feet long. That's the longest facade, but they also have relief in that facade, as you know. And they are 4 stories, so it's 3 stories of residential over retail. And that's what it looks like. This is what people talked about. Again, they weren't saying this is what I want in Deerfield, but they want that level of street level activity and experience. So the other one that came up is one that you know very well, which is Avalon. And again, they weren't saying I want that level of density, but they were saying I would like to be able to experience something like this in Deerfield. And I think, to be clear, this is not what they want in all of Milton, and Deerfield offers the opportunity to get a little taste of this in the experience. And again, it's at the street level. Those multifamily buildings are between 4 and 6 stories over retail. Again, somewhere, you know, how does that feel? That's 526 units of multifamily with 570,000 square feet of retail. So it's a lot of retail, and a 750,000 square feet of office, 330 hotel rooms, and 44,000. The hotel has a 44,000 square foot conference center, which is a small-ish conference hotel. But what you see is again, the changes in plane and the changes, something to try to break down the scale of the buildings. What I would say is, you know, you don't see any setbacks at the top in the buildings at Avalon. Now, the 2 examples that were universally loved in public comment, this on the lower right-hand picture is the Atworth at Melody Farms. So I actually think this is an analogous community outside of Chicago in terms of demographics where this was developed. It's a 260 unit building. It ranges between 3 and 4 stories. It's actually really well done in terms of relief and making it look like it's a much smaller building. But if you look in the plan on the upper right, the building on the far left, that is actually this building. So if you looked at it in plan, you would not think it's the building that's in the picture below. So really the point here is that architectural details and massing and creating relief and changes in plane are really important to break down the size of how our brain perceives how big a building is, and does it seem compatible. So something that is only 100 units can actually seem less compatible than something that is 300 units, depending on how it's designed. So, and this building that you see is it's part of a redevelopment of a suburban shopping center, and what it also has in it is a high level of residential amenity. The other note I want to say, just for context, all of these examples I'm showing you, the rents in these multifamily, they are rental, but they're around $3,000 a month in rent. So we're not talking inexpensive housing. And very few 3 bedrooms, mostly 1 bedroom and den, and 2 bedroom. There are a few 3 bedrooms. This one actually has a component of corporate housing. Just because of where it is, there's a component that rents just as corporate housing for people who are working during the week in one location and live somewhere else. The other image, the one on the bottom right, also got a lot of love from the DRB and the planning board. And I wanted to give context to this. This one is actually in Huntsville, Alabama. It's called the Collins, and it's in the high-tech corridor there near University of Alabama, Birmingham, and the Rocket Center. It's 334 units across 26 acres. So it's broken down into a lot smaller buildings, and the multifamily has about less than 100 units per building. So that building that you see in the picture, it's really about 150 feet long on each facade. Now, some of this is hard to tell, and I'm going to show you some images. Again, the scale and detail really make a difference in making something feel that granularity that you want to see. I wanted to just go. So again, I said this building here is 150 feet long on each facade. And this building is 500 feet long on the same facade that you're looking at. However, it feels like 4 different buildings when you're looking at it in view, because they have significant recesses. So I think those are things to consider, and how you're thinking about how you think about multifamily is, how do you make it feel granular? And it's the devil is in the details of that setback. I'm going to pause for a minute. And I will say, you can see in the picture, sort of in the circle in the upper right, the step back is quite significant as for a multifamily building, which creates a nice feel. I'm not recommending 500-foot long buildings, but this is an example to show you how that can work. Any questions so far?
Where the South Highway 9 area, is that where you were thinking about?
I think so. I think that in particular, it's probably more in the South Deerfield Parkway area. You might be able to get some multifamily, and I know that we've talked about there is the opportunity on the Fry site potentially for some multifamily buildings like this, and some of they're really conducive for the larger sites that have more depth, because you have to be able to provide the room for the parking. So there really are there's only about 6 sites that would even accommodate a multifamily building with a parking deck.
And when you're saying multifamily, is there always going to be a mixed use component, like retail?
Yeah, I think that, and we've talked about this. So the requirement is currently that they are vertically integrated. Now, I think that there's it might not be the whole facade, and how it's integrated with the entire site, I think is going to be a discussion point. But the reality is what's really important, and I want to go to this, is that you include really high quality public facing, and I say public facing, but there are residential amenity uses that need to be located on the ground floor. Sometimes they get located somewhere else in the building. You want them to be located on the ground floor because it's the pool room, it's the gym, it's the lobby, it's the business, and it's the co-working spaces, because any of these buildings that are being developed at this price point have a high level of amenities for residents that make really good ground floor uses that create that active feel, the eyes on the street that you talk about, of a good walkable environment. So you want to make sure, incorporated in with the retail, that that all those public facing spaces also get located on the ground floor. And the other element of that too is if there are locations where there are multifamily units on the ground floor, that their door faces the street, so that it's not from the hallway. They have a porch. It's a front porch of a multifamily unit. Think of it the same way you think of a front porch on a single family house. The other design details, and I said that the architecture makes a huge difference in it, making it feel granular. And that is, I think a big one is, no Juliet balconies on street-facing facades. There may be an interior courtyard that doesn't face the public right-of-way. We've talked about that, you can have a little more flexibility on these private-facing units, but anything facing the public right-of-way or a street doesn't need to have Juliet balconies. Recessed balconies, or balconies that are a part of an architectural element of the building, which you see in this facade. I think it's important that the balconies also are just like your front porches that we talked about, and with Arnold Mill, they're about eight feet deep, so they're really true usable balconies. Pitched roofs, building breaks, and use of material and color to differentiate floors and planes, which you see in these examples. So our last question for the night: how is a new multifamily building in a redevelopment, particularly in South Deerfield, different from what is there today? There's about 2,400 multifamily units there today.
Asking how is it going?
Yeah, how do you envision them being different than what's there today?
Rated. A lot of these, the segregated blobs.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, the only way we'll allow them now is if they, currently it's a 50-50 ratio. So they have to have 50% of the density has to be non-residential. Could be light industrial, could be retail, could be office, but it has to be something. Of course, the envisionment is that it would have ground floor retail so that, people have a nice experience. You go there for the retail experience, and then sort of the housing to some degree is vertically integrated. Maybe not all of it, but a portion of it is, and maybe some portions of the building aren't the ground floor access. So like if you were to go to Alpharetta City Center, some of the building has a partial retail ground floor, and then if you walk down the block, same building, but the ground floor is part of the multifamily. So multifamilies, I say multifamily, they're really rental units, and the one in Alpharetta has a structured parking garage internally, so you don't see it on the external. You don't have a lot of parking because these things can generate tons of surface parking. But in those ratios next week, I'm going to be talking to council, so you'll be there. The planning commission will be there to see, what we're presenting, and I'm going to show you different scenarios of percentages and what those buildings would look like and how they're laid out on the site. But I really wanted tonight to, better understand that it's the architecture, because we could show you buildings that have 30 units in them and they just look totally flat and imposing. And then you can have buildings with 150 units in them and it just feels more Milton-esque. So I think it's going to really be a tall order when we get, I know developers will come in with some multifamily. They are use permits. I know the council's going to have to look at that. But I think if it does get where the council says, okay, we'll allow some multifamily units in this development, even at, small degrees, maybe they say, okay, here's 100 units, 120 units. It's still going to be up to DRB to sit down and say, hey, if we're going to have this building type, what we have to ensure that building type is really Milton-esque and broken down in scale and has pitched roofs and recessed balconies instead of projecting balconies, and has different fenestrations of windows and different recesses and projections and different building materials like you're seeing, because it really will make a difference. That if we can integrate it into a Milton architecture, I don't think it will be quite as imposing than if we just look at something that's built in Norcross that's just a flat facade. You go to Forsyth County, you can look at some of these and you just identify them immediately as, oh, look, these are just apartment houses, big apartment complexes. Well, we want to really integrate it into the retail experience, into the office, into, having it face civic space, something open, so that it becomes softer. And those are the images I think you're starting. Look at the articulation of that facade. It's so in depth. Now, builders don't like that because they're going to be like, we just want four corners, give me 4 walls and I'm done. To do that is much more expensive, but I think that's the only way Milton would be able to accept anything that's got this much density in it.
I think they'll do that, knowing they can get $3,000
a month.
Yeah.
Right. But we got to make sure we hold them to it. Yeah, we got to really hold them to it. And then that's why I'm trying to put in these design standards that in the event it does happen, that, we have examples that say DRB, Planning Commission can look at the site plans and say, wait a minute, we want to ensure that these things, do they abut city streets? So like when Allison said, we're looking at things, and if the building abuts a city street like Webb Road, maybe it should only be a 3-story height maximum at that point. If the building then turns a corner and goes back into the site and it goes up to 4 or 5 stories, it's not as imposing on the city street because we're not really having a lot of height here. And when you're driving down, to have a building facade that's 200-300 feet long at that height is really a huge impact for Milton, because we just don't have a lot of it. It's not like it's a common look. So it's kind of like, how is that building situated? So when you're looking at those buildings and those site plans come in, I think it's important to say, look, we do want street-facing retail, we want internal-facing retail, but we really don't want, we do like vertically integrated, we just don't want a lot of height on it. And then, if you want to go into the site with a little more height, it's less impactful to our visual aesthetic. We're trying to get it more pedestrian-oriented, right? We're trying to get the streets to look nicer, have golf cart paths, and we really don't want to have massive buildings that look, especially if they're flat facades.
I think you mentioned also too, another key element to make the whole site look attractive is there has to be accommodations for underground parking, hidden parking structures, and that's sufficient. And also to to me, it adds value too, because I know I really enjoyed in Minneapolis when in the condo I lived in, I had covered parking, so I wasn't going out in the snow. But so that's key. But also too, we talked a little bit about this on Arnold Mill. We need to have some landscaping requirements for it as well.
Yes.
It's not just that the building looks nice, because some of these apartments that you see come up, I look at them and say, you know what's missing? There's no landscaping.
So I think that goes back to that integration, like a consistent theme for every building use is integration and with civic spaces in a street and block plan that's providing for those special places for people to gather. And I think we also want to encourage that any outdoor, and we talk about this a little bit in the requirements for hotel and residential, any outdoor amenity as much as possible that amenity can be integrated into a public space versus a totally, or it's semi-private, but it engages with a civic space, that's really important to create something that's not isolated, but again, it's building community rather than turning its back and sort of insulating itself from the greater community.
Well, we certainly don't want it to look like that Alpharetta project that's going on now off of Haynes Bridge at, can't think of the crossroad where they're just building, I mean, they're just plain ugly. The white buildings, one by one. I
Yeah.
mean,
Those are more townhomes right there.
Yeah, they're more townhomes. No, but
Our
the
lines
same
are.
idea. It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, horrible.
It's Brock built.
I think one of the things we're trying to emphasize and that we've heard, that something that though Deerfield is going to be different from Crabapple, different from Birmingham, a continuous element is the landscape and the trees. And so we want to make sure that we're emphasizing that. So I'll make sure that we're layering that in every single chapter is that landscape
Well,
element.
typically when they submit a building like that, they will submit a landscape plan as well. And then we'll critique that as well as the architectural of the building also.
Yeah. It's interesting. You gave some examples in Alpharetta and the ones that are above like coalition fermented, and those units are condos, not apartments. So what is the incentive right now for condominiums versus apartments?
Right now, it's almost impossible to get financing for condos.
Yeah, we don't differentiate between the two, but it's a thought. I could look at it.
So it's multifamily. It could be owner.
It could be.
It could be condos.
It could be condos. Yes, some of these buildings, and you see them in places, and depending on the time and quite frankly, it really reflects the timing of the financial market, whether it's condo or, if you go, you drive in even in Sandy Springs or Midtown or Buckhead, you don't know a rental building and a condo building. You don't know when you're on the street. And really, and that's what you want to set as a standard in Milton, that it looks no different if it's an ownership building or if it's a rental building. It should be of the same very high quality and commanding and attracting a resident that is looking for the opportunity to live in Milton and maybe just not ready to buy a single family home. As we've talked.
Oh, I was going to just reiterate that in our code, we don't, we just call it multifamily. I mean, and even the old code would call it apartments, but it could be condominium or rental. So we even, over on Deerfield, we do have Devonshire actually as a condominium development, although you wouldn't really necessarily know that looking at it.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah.
So.
Robin, can I just ask a quick question? If planning commission just sees the site plan with the LDP and everything, and can we mandate that they submit in a concept plan, actually mandate? Now, I know we always ask, but can we require them to show elevations and what the building looks like so that?
I mean, typically when we've had use permits and rezonings, we like to see some architecture. So,
yeah, we don't
and I think
require it,
that's, it just makes for a stronger application and a better understanding of what's ultimately going to be developed. So,
Seems to be working. Just want to make sure we look at that.
Yep. And I believe multifamily in these districts, T5, T6, are by use permit.
That's
So we
right.
would have
That's
to see
correct.
them.
So
That's
we have
right.
some flexibility on it.
Yeah, I do think it's important to emphasize that multifamily is a use permit, and I think that's so it's always going to get an extra level of scrutiny or review.
Those guys? Thanks for staying
Thank you.
very late. It's
I know.
9:20.
We're dragging.
I'm
Very
dragging.
good. You guys have come far.
Great
You've
presentation.
done a lot of work.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Come far, and the attention to details shows. So thank you guys for what you're putting in.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
And I'll see you on Monday.
Well, hold on.
And I invite all the DRB there Monday too, so you can see it.
Do I need to adjourn or?
Oh, I think,
Point of
yeah, we'll let you adjourn.
Okay, so that said, thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time
Thank
and
you.
everything. At this time, I will call for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Planning Commission takes over.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good job, right? I think we did good.